Chapter 1997. Sky Dragon City. Outside the city. In a dense forest, Qin Feiyong appeared out of thin air. Following closely. With a wave of his hand, two middle-aged men appeared. It was Zhao Tailai and Tang Hai. "Greetings, young master." The two bowed. Qin Feiyong asked, "Did you hear the conversation between Fire Lotus and I?" "Yes." The two nodded. "Good. The divine crystals are all inside. Go to the treasure pavilion. You must complete the mission." Qin Feiyong threw the Qiankuan bag to the two of them. "Yes." The two of them respectfully responded and turned to walk towards Sky Dragon City. After watching the two of them leave, Qin Feiyong opened another altar and quickly left. With Tang Hai and Zhao Tailai handling things, he was at ease. Sky Dragon Sea. On the coast, a black-clothed youth stood proudly on a huge rock with his hands behind his back. He was about 1.8 meters tall with a jade-like appearance, eyes like pearls, and two thick eyebrows, like a knife, made his eyes look extremely sharp. Woo-woo. Waves of sea breeze blew. A head of thick black hair wantonly fluttered behind him. He was like a god, with an extraordinary temperament, and the aura he exuded was extremely terrifying. And on his chest, there was also a flame pattern. Swish! A white-clothed youth suddenly appeared in the sky. On his clothes, there was also a flame pattern. The white-clothed youth glanced around, lowered his head to look at the black-clothed youth standing on the huge rock, and laughed. "You are indeed here." The black-clothed youth looked up and grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth, and said, "Didn't we agree to meet at night? Didn't you already come? Then I naturally can't let you wait here." The white-clothed youth laughed. "Haha," the black-clothed youth laughed and said, "After the agreement, I really couldn't stay in the cave, so I decided to come first." That's right. These two people, one was Qin Feiyong, the other was the madman in cave number 1. And at that time the madman gave Qin Feiyong a note, was actually a challenge, as well as the coordinates of this place. Originally, they made an appointment for the evening. But when he heard Fire Lotus say that madman had left the cave, Qin Feiyong guessed that he must have come here. As expected. He couldn't even wait for half a day. Just how battle-hungry was this guy? "Actually, I'm quite surprised too," Madman said again. "What accident?" Qin Feiyong was suspicious. "Originally, I thought that you would reject my challenge, but I didn't expect that you would agree without hesitation," Madman said. "If it were anyone else, I would definitely refuse. Because I'm not interested in such a boring and meaningless game. But for a battle maniac like you I can't refuse, because if I don't agree, you will definitely not stop. So, I might as well fight with you so that I can have some peace in the future," Qin Feiyong said helplessly. "Haha," the madman laughed loudly and said, "Do you hate people like me?" "A little." Qin Feiyong did not deny it. "I like your straightforward personality. Follow me." Madman took a step forward and rushed into the endless sea without looking back. And Qin Feiyong frowned and chased after him, asking, "Isn't it here? This place is too close to the Nine Heavens Palace. I don't want anyone to come and cause trouble when I'm fighting," Madman said. Qin Feiyong was a little helpless. The two of them, one in front and one behind, cut through the sky and went deep into the Sky Dragon Sea. Isn't that Madman? Why did he come to the Sky Dragon Sea? And the person next to him? He also seems a little familiar. Wait. He seems to be the fierce person who cheated Feng Zijuan. That's right. It's him, Jiang Haotian. Why would these two people enter the Sky Dragon Sea together? Let's go and take a look. Along the way, Qin Feiyong and Madman met many people. These people were basically disciples of the Nine Heavens Palace, training at the edge of the Sky Dragon Sea. About half an hour passed. Behind the two of them, at least 200 to 300 people followed. This made Qin Feiyong involuntarily frown. Madman glanced at Qin Feiyong's expression, turned around, stared at those disciples, and shouted, "Scram at once, otherwise, I'll destroy you all." Hearing this, the 200 to 300 people immediately dispersed in an uproar. Their expressions were filled with fear. "Impressive." Qin Feiyong looked at Madman in admiration and said with a smile. Madman smiled smugly and continued to rush forward. The sea was very calm. The warm sun and refreshing sea breeze made people feel especially comfortable. And along the way, they did not see a single sea beast. It was very hard to imagine that such a peaceful sky dragon sea would be the northern domain's largest forbidden area. Don't underestimate this place. Although we didn't see any sea beasts, they are looking at us. It's just that with me around, they don't dare to show their heads. Madman said. Qin Feiyong was stunned and immediately released his divine sense, surging towards the sea below. Sure enough, under the sea, there were countless sea beasts staring at them. He was even more shocked. Just how terrifying was this madman's strength? Even these ferocious sea beasts were so afraid of him. Basically all the sea beasts in this sea have been beaten up by me. Madman suddenly said, causing Qin Feiyong's jaw to almost drop. If that was really the case, then this guy in front of him was undoubtedly a madman. How far is it? Qin Feiyong calmed down the shock in his heart and asked. We're almost there. Madman said without turning his head. About 100 breaths later, an island gradually entered Qin Feiyong's sight. That island was huge, and even with Qin Feiyong's current cultivation, he couldn't see the end. It was like a continent standing on the sea. That island is shaped like a sea turtle, so I named it Turtle King Island. Turtle King Island is our battlefield. And ordinary opponents are not qualified to step into Turtle King Island. Madman said. In that case I have to feel honored? Qin Feiyong was stunned. You should indeed feel honored. Because you are the third person to step onto this island. Madman said. While talking, the two had already entered the sky above Turtle King Island, but Madman didn't stop and continued to fly towards the depths of the island. Third. Then who were the first two? Qin Feiyong asked suspiciously. The first person is naturally me. Because Turtle King Island is my exclusive battlefield. Without my permission, not to mention the disciples of Nine Heavens Palace, even elder-level figures don't dare to step into this place. The second person is a woman called Feng Zihan, the #1 expert on the heaven list. Madman said. Feng Zihan. Qin Feiyong murmured. Isn't this woman the elder sister of young noble Feng? And she seems to be the master of the Jade Zither Pavilion. Qin Feiyong asked calmly, You fought with Feng Zihan before? Madman nodded. Then how is her strength? In the end, did you win or did she win? Qin Feiyong was curious. How can the #1 on the heaven list be weak? As for the end I lost. Madman said. #1 on the heaven list? Qin Feiyong frowned. This so-called heaven list, he really didn't know what the situation was. Everyone on the heaven list is an existence that all the disciples of Nine Heavens Palace look up to. There are only a total of 10 people on the heaven list. Being on the heaven list is not only a proof of strength, but you can also get more resources. Let's put it bluntly. Those who are on the heaven list are the future Palace Master, Vice Palace Master, and the candidates for the top 10 elders. Madman said. Qin Feiyong was dumbfounded. He didn't expect the heaven list to be so valuable. What about the earth list? Qin Feiyong asked again. The earth list is a bit inferior. However, they are also candidates for the future Palace Master. Madman said. Qin Feiyong was secretly speechless. Madman suddenly grinned and said with disdain, Actually, it's not a big deal. Qin Feiyong was stunned. Madman said, What candidates? What resources? I don't care about it. Even if you don't care about it, there are a lot of people who care about it. Qin Feiyong was speechless. Madman said in disdain, Those people are all idiots. Isn't it good to be free in life? Qin Feiyong shook his head and smiled. He didn't expect this person to have such an indifferent temperament. It's really rare. Hold on. You just said that those who are on the heaven list can get more resources. How much is this more? Qin Feiyong asked. How should I put this? Madman pondered for a while and said, Let's put it this way. The #1 on the heaven list can receive 1 million soul stones every month. What? 1 million? Qin Feiyong was dumbfounded. As an outer disciple, he could only receive 10 soul stones every month. 10 soul stones and 1 million soul stones. How many times was the difference? It was 100,000 times. Many people would often say that there was a huge difference between the two of them. At this moment, Qin Feiyong truly experienced this difference. We're here. Just as Qin Feiyong was in a daze, Madman's voice sounded. Qin Feiyong was taken aback and quickly came back to his senses. He looked around. This should be the center of Turtle King Island. The entire Turtle King Island was filled with mountains and rivers, but not a single blade of grass grew. It was filled with a desolate aura. There was no trace of a sea beast. There was dead silence all around. Madman took a step forward and landed half a mile away. He turned to face Qin Feiyong and said, "Are you ready?" Qin Feiyong took a deep breath and nodded to Madman. Boom! Madman was the first to erupt with an aura. But this aura was only at the level of a low-level war god. "What are you doing?" Qin Feiyong was suspicious. Since it's a spar, it naturally has to be fair. Now, whether it is my divine power or the strength of my body, they are all suppressed to the same level as you. In addition, in this spar, we won't use divine weapons. We will rely on our own methods. Madman said. What about divine arts and battle souls? Qin Feiyong asked. Of course. Madman nodded. The corner of Qin Feiyong's mouth lifted slightly and he said with a smile, "Then you might lose." Haha. Madman suddenly laughed out loud. His eyes suddenly became sharp like blades as he said word by word, "As long as you have the ability." Boom. Qin Feiyong didn't say anything else as divine power surged out. Chapter 1998. Shwa. Just as Qin Feiyong released his aura, the madman took a step forward and arrived in front of Qin Feiyong, slapping out with his palm. Qin Feiyong moved his feet and easily avoided it. Seeing that Qin Feiyong didn't fight head-on, the madman couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. He turned around and clenched his fist, punching towards Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong's figure flashed again and again. In the same realm, he wasn't afraid of anyone, including speed. What do you mean? The madman was furious. Divine power surged out and blocked all of Qin Feiyong's escape routes. Then, he punched towards Qin Feiyong. This scene seemed to be out of Qin Feiyong's expectations. He looked slightly flustered. He hurriedly raised his arm and slapped out. Seeing Qin Feiyong finally make a move, the madman's eyes flashed with anticipation. Yes. He was looking forward to the appearance of the golden light, which was the return formula. However, the golden light he was looking forward to did not appear. The fist and palm met in an instant. Humph! Qin Feiyong let out a muffled groan as his body shook. Immediately after, he was like a meteorite, smashing into the mountains below. Boom! A majestic mountain range that was thousands of feet tall collapsed in an instant. This? The madman was stunned. What about the golden light? Below. Qin Feiyong climbed out of the dust. His face was as pale as paper. He looked up at the madman and said, "You won." Won? The madman's face was dull. Immediately after, a monstrous anger roared out. The madman roared, "What kind of joke is this? Who was the one who confidently said that I might lose? Now it's over? Do you think I'm stupid? Why don't you pretend a bit more?" "I'm not pretending." Qin Feiyong shook his head. "Then tell me, why didn't the golden light that reflected my divine power in the morning appear? Such a heaven-defying method hasn't even been used yet and you dare to admit defeat. Do you really think I'm a fool?" The madman's hair stood up in anger. His body was full of hostility. Don't misunderstand. Don't misunderstand. That golden light is indeed very powerful, but it can only be used once a day. Qin Feiyong said. Once? The madman raised his eyebrows. Yes. Qin Feiyong nodded. Then we'll wait. Let's spar tomorrow. The madman said. What? Qin Feiyong looked at madman in shock. He thought that the madman would stop after hearing this, but he didn't expect that he still wanted to fight. That's right. He came here purely as a show to satisfy his desires as a battle desire. But now, he still didn't stop. There was still didn't still. This was a bit was this madman simply sat cross-legged in the air. He looked at Qin Feiyong and coldly snorted. Before dawn, none of us are allowed to leave Turtle King Island. Restricting my freedom. Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows. But the madman didn't pay attention to him and closed his eyes. Qin Feiyong frowned. It seemed that he couldn't avoid this battle. Madman! Qin Feiyong suddenly spoke. The madman still ignored him. Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed with a cold light as he slapped out with his palm, golden light rolling out. The madman suddenly opened his eyes and they flickered. Qin Feiyong said, "Since you insist on fighting, then I'll accompany you, but there has to be a prize." "Are you playing with me?" The madman turned a deaf ear and stared at Qin Feiyong, his eyes full of killing intent. "Playing with you? There's no need for that. I just don't want to do something meaningless." Qin Feiyong shook his head. "As long as you're willing to go all out, I can satisfy you." The madman raised the corner of his mouth and laughed. "Sure enough, you're a battle maniac. If you lose to me, you have to do something for me unconditionally. Similarly, if I lose to you, I have to do something for you as well." Qin Feiyong said. "No need. If you lose to me, you have to give me that technique that can reflect divine power." The madman said. "Deal." Qin Feiyong nodded. "Haha. Straightforward enough, confident enough. Let's fight." The madman laughed and with surging divine power, he threw a punch at Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong didn't dodge anymore. He took a step into the sky and threw a punch at the madman. Neither of them used divine power. Boom! The two fists collided with a loud bang. A destructive aura, like a tide, surged out in all directions with the two as the center. The surrounding void was crazily shattered. Ha! Both of their eyes revealed a trace of surprise at the same time. The madman said, "You've tempered your body?" "Yes." Qin Feiyong nodded and said, "You've tempered your body too?" "Yes." The madman nodded. Haha. The two laughed at the same time, waved their fists, and began a physical battle. Bang! Bang! Rumble! The sound of fists colliding was like thunder from the 9 heavens, resounding in all directions. Outside Turtle King Island. Above the sea, a group of people gathered here, looking at Turtle King Island curiously. These people were the disciples of 9 Heaven Palace that were driven away before. But later, they quietly followed behind. They had already sensed the battle fluctuations inside. But because Turtle King Island was too big and Qin Feiyong and the madman were in the central area of Turtle King Island, they couldn't see the situation inside. Why are they fighting? You still don't know the temper of the madman. Who can escape from him? But then again, for Zhang Haotian to be invited to Turtle King Island by the madman, his strength definitely can't be underestimated. I used to think that this person had an undeserved reputation, but now it seems that he really has some ability. Aren't you talking nonsense? Is Turtle King Island a place that ordinary people can enter? In the past, only Feng Zihan had entered. Feng Zihan, that's the #1 powerhouse on the heaven list. Even some elders are inferior to her. Even now, I still remember that the last time the madman and Feng Zihan fought here for 3 days and 3 nights. In the end, even the great elder was alarmed. And this Zhang Haotian is the second person to enter Turtle King Island after Feng Zihan. Do you think his strength is simple? I just don't know how long Zhang Haotian can last in front of the madman this time. Everyone was discussing. They all wanted to enter Turtle King Island and watch the battle up close. But no one dared to take half a step forward. Haha. Awesome, awesome. In the sky above the center of the island. The madman laughed loudly as he attacked mercilessly. Qin Feiyong also went all out. The power of his physical body poured out like a torrent. However, after countless rounds of collision, neither of them had any injuries. The madman said, "It's about time to warm up." "Yes, it's time to get serious." Qin Feiyong nodded his head. Boom. The two released their divine power at the same time. The madman's divine power was blood red, as if it was condensed from blood. It dyed the world red and emitted a monstrous evil aura. Qin Feiyong used the power of fire, turning into a sea of fire that swept in all directions. This world was like a big furnace in an instant. The two divine powers carried a destructive aura as they roared in the sky and fiercely collided together. Boom! The world lost its color and the void was annihilated. The two retreated at the same time. Qin Feiyong's face turned pale. A stream of blood rushed to his throat, but he swallowed it back down. The purple gold dragon blood must not be exposed. And the madman naturally didn't need to hide it. Wisps of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. "I really didn't misjudge you. You are a powerhouse worthy of a battle. The madman wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. The boiling battle intent became even more terrifying. Thank you for the compliment. Qin Feiyong smiled. But in his eyes, there was a bright light. This battle couldn't be in a stalemate. He had to end it quickly. Otherwise, with the madman's strength, he would definitely be injured. Clang! One after another, sword shadows appeared out of nowhere. Guiyuan sword technique. A total of 70 sword shadows, sharp enough to tear the world apart. Without any hesitation, Qin Feiyong waved his hand and the 70 sword shadows slashed towards the madman. Divine technique. The madman paused for a moment, then his face was filled with disdain. A mere low-grade divine technique can't hurt me. He didn't even activate his divine technique and directly took a step forward. His face was filled with confidence. Boom! Madman punched out with a powerful aura, instantly shattering a large portion of the 70 sword shadows. Actually, Qin Feiyong also knew that low-grade divine techniques couldn't pose a threat to the madman. Because the madman's body was as strong as his. With the strength of their bodies, they could even crush middle-grade divine artifacts. And the grade of divine artifacts and divine techniques corresponded. Low grade against low grade. Middle grade against middle grade. High grade against high grade. Perfect grade against supreme grade. So even if someone of the same level used a middle-grade divine technique, they couldn't hurt them. Even if it was a high-grade divine technique or high-grade divine artifact, they could still fight with their bodies. Knowing that it wouldn't work but still doing this, it wasn't that Qin Feiyong was stupid, he had a purpose. Although the madman seemed simple-minded, as a battle maniac, he had more battle experience than anyone else. For people like this, as long as they entered a battle state, whether it was their perception or their senses, they would all be focused. In short, on the surface he seemed careless, but in reality, he was always on guard. So, Qin Feiyong wanted to make the madman careless and slowly underestimate him. As long as the madman was careless, he would quickly defeat him. In just a few blinks of an eye, the 70 sword shadows were all shattered. Qin Feiyong's blood boiled. Purple gold dragon blood rose to his throat several times, but he swallowed it back down. Boom! He raised his arm again, his index finger pointing in the air. An invisible force burst out. Void returning art. The current void returning art had transformed into a middle-grade divine technique. If it was in Great Qin or Forgotten Continent, a middle-grade divine technique would definitely be a treasure. But here, it wasn't anything. Especially in front of the madman. He could destroy it with a wave of his hand. You don't know my body and strength. This level of divine technique is useless against me. Can you be a bit more serious? The madman said angrily. He thought that Qin Feiyong was deliberately playing with him. Qin Feiyong turned a deaf ear to him and once again conjured the sun and moon eclipse. Still a middle-grade divine technique? The madman was furious. He leaped forward and instantly shattered it with a punch. He stared at Qin Feiyong and said gloomily, "If you continue like this, I will be angry." Literature Museum. Chapter 1999. I'm just afraid that you won't get angry. Qin Feiyong snickered secretly. The void returning art, Guiyuan sword art, and eclipse moon were once again evolved. Enough! It's really enough! The madman roared again and again, like a demon god, his black hair fluttering in the wind. He shattered the Guiyuan sword art with a punch, shattered the eclipse moon with a palm, and then smashed the void returning art with a head-on collision. The three great divine arts were instantly disintegrated. This kind of strength was truly terrifying. Swish! Following closely. The madman took a step forward, his entire body erupting with a shocking killing intent as he said, "Since you only have this little ability, then there's no point in keeping you alive. Now is the time." Qin Feiyong's eyes flickered as he activated the return art, directly disappearing from the madman's line of sight. And the madman was startled. Then, he felt a fatal sense of danger behind him. At this moment, Qin Feiyong was standing behind the madman, a wisp of blood-red light shooting out from his fingertips. The madman's hair stood on end. Over the years, he had fought with countless people, been injured, and lost his life. It could be said, he had crawled out from death. But this sense of danger was something he had never felt before. It was as if there was a death god standing behind him, waving a sickle, about to chop off his head. Even when he fought with Feng Zihan, the number 1 on the heaven list, for 3 days and 3 nights, he did not have this kind of feeling. The blood-red light was like a flash in the pan, instantly shattering the madman's flesh and blood, heading straight for his qi. The outcome has been decided, Qin Feiyong muttered, a smile creeping onto his face. However, at this moment, a golden light suddenly appeared on the madman's body. The blood-red light that was about to enter his qi was actually blocked by the golden light. The smile on Qin Feiyong's face suddenly froze, his eyes filled with disbelief. Boom! Immediately after, a mighty divine might, like a volcano, rushed out from the madman's body. That wisp of blood-red light was actually shattered. Puff! The bloody light shattered. Qin Feiyong could no longer hold it in. A mouthful of blood gushed out from his throat and directly sprayed onto the madman's back. Oh no! Qin Feiyong's expression changed. The aura of dragon blood? Although the madman's back was facing Qin Feiyong, he could feel the aura of the purple-gold dragon blood the moment it appeared. He abruptly turned around and looked at Qin Feiyong. There was still a trace of purple-gold blood at the corner of Qin Feiyong's mouth. He then touched the clothes on his back and lowered his head to look at the purple-gold dragon blood in his hand. His eyes were filled with shock. Looking at the madman's expression, Qin Feiyong let out a long breath. The nervousness in his heart disappeared. It wasn't because the madman didn't recognize the purple-gold dragon blood. The reason for that was because he had already decided to kill that man. Since they were all going to die, what was there to be nervous about? This is purple-gold dragon blood. The madman's eyes trembled as he raised his head and stared at Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong said indifferently, "Now you know why I admitted defeat before." The madman said, "You were afraid that if we really fought, your purple-gold dragon blood would be exposed." "Yes. Just now, I kept using low-tier and mid-tier techniques to deliberately anger you and make you careless. In the end I succeeded. But what I didn't expect was that you actually had the ability to block my kill formula." Qin Feiyong said regretfully. "Kill formula?" The madman raised his eyebrows. Qin Feiyong said with a smile, "At this time, there is no need to ask this." Looking at the smile on Qin Feiyong's face, the madman inexplicably felt a chill in his heart. "There is indeed no need. But I want to know, who are you to Qin Batian?" The madman said solemnly. Qin Feiyong said, "If I say that I don't know him, or that my original body is a purple-gold dragon, you will definitely not believe me." "Nonsense." The madman sneered. Qin Feiyong said, "All right, I admit that Qin Batian is my ancestor." "What? Ancestor? Then why are you called Jiang Haotian?" The madman was shocked. Qin Feiyong said with a smile, "Isn't it obvious?" The madman's pupils shrank as he asked, "What is your real name?" "Qin Feiyong." Qin Feiyong said. "Qin Feiyong," the madman murmured and suddenly laughed. "I didn't expect that Qin Batian actually has a descendant. Today, if I want to leave Turtle King Island alive, I'm afraid it won't be easy." "You are indeed a smart person," Qin Feiyong said with a smile. "Haha. Then let's give it a try. Let's see if you have the ability or not." The madman took a step forward. His divine aura was vast and shook all directions. However, his cultivation base didn't change at all. It was still suppressed to the level of a war god. Qin Feiyong also took a step forward. The power of the divine dragon surged out. The divine dragon seal instantly appeared. Its terrifying divine aura shook the heavens. Since the purple-gold dragon blood had been exposed, there was naturally no need to hide anything else. The power of the divine dragon. "I'm really envious." The madman sighed. But his eyes became sharper and sharper. Boom! Accompanied by a boom, blood-colored divine power surged out like a tide. A palm-sized blood-colored square seal appeared in the sky. It was surging with blood energy and a murderous aura. "Let's see if your divine dragon seal is stronger or my blood demon seal is stronger." As the madman's voice fell, the blood-colored square seal expanded in the wind. In an instant, it was like a mountain, carrying an unparalleled destructive power as it blasted towards the divine dragon seal. This aura. Qin Feiyong's eyes trembled slightly. The so-called blood demon seal's aura was actually stronger than the divine dragon seal. Could it be a peak-level divine technique? Not daring to be careless, the power of the divine dragon surged. The divine dragon seal also quickly expanded to thousands of feet. It was no different from the blood demon seal. In a trance, there seemed to be a dragon roar that shook the sky. The two square seals collided and shattered in the void at the same time. Blood light and purple gold divine light illuminated half the sky. Puff! And at the same time, the two retreated several feet. Blood flowed from the corners of their mouths. It's indeed a peak-level divine technique, Qin Feiyong muttered. Although the divine dragon seal and the blood demon seal appear to be equally matched, it should be known that Qin Feiyong's divine dragon seal was innately stronger than other divine powers. A divine technique evolved from the divine dragon power was naturally stronger than other perfect divine techniques. In other words, if the blood devil seal was a perfect deity formula, then the divine dragon seal should have had the upper hand and not the current situation where both jade and common stone were destroyed. The power of the purple gold divine dragon is indeed worthy of its reputation. Frenzy's fighting spirit rose. Roar of the blood demon. With a roar, blood-colored divine power soared into the sky. A figure shrouded in blood mist appeared in the sky. Roar! That figure was tens of thousands of feet tall. It stepped on the void and had a blood-red crown on its head. It was also wearing blood-red armor. That monstrous evil aura surged in all directions. From afar, it really looked like a terrifying blood demon had returned. The blood devil raised his head and roared. A blood-colored wave rolled out and pounced towards Qin Feiyong from all directions. Qin Feiyong's eyes widened. That blood-colored wave was not formed by divine power, but a sound wave. A terrifying aura that could destroy heaven and earth. It made one tremble in fear. He was more and more surprised by the strength displayed by Frenzy. He did not dare to be careless. With a wave of his hand, the purple gold divine dragon appeared out of thin air and let out a deafening dragon roar. Waves after waves of formless sound waves blasted out in a mighty manner. Boom! The two sound waves crazily collided in the sky. The void within a radius of hundreds of thousands of miles shattered. The island below was even more fragmented and in a complete mess. In the end, the two divine techniques ended in a draw. Unbelievable! A mere perfect battle technique can actually be on par with a peak divine technique. This is the power of the purple gold divine dragon? Frenzy murmured as his body trembled. This was not fear. It was excitement. The blood in his body was boiling. This was the opponent he wanted. What identity the other party had was not important to him at all. As long as he could fight with him happily, it was fine. As expected of a battle maniac. Qin Feiyong shook his head. To be honest, he admired this person. But there was no other way. Even if he admired him, he had to kill him. Who told this person to know something that he should not know? Clang! Boom! With a thought, the emperor statue appeared in the sky. The mighty emperor aura instantly shrouded all directions. Qin Batian. Frenzy looked at the emperor statue with bright eyes. Qin Feiyong was taken aback and hurriedly said, "You've seen my ancestor? If you win, I'll tell you." Frenzy laughed. Blood-colored divine power roared and the blood demon from before appeared again. But there was a halberd in the blood demon's hand. That halberd was also like blood, surging with a murderous aura. Why do I feel that this person's divine technique is similar to the divine dragon technique and the fire phoenix technique? Qin Feiyong frowned. The first blood-colored square seal, then the roar of the blood demon, and now this move, they all had the same effect as the divine dragon technique and the fire phoenix technique. Before he could think about it, the blood demon had already charged over. With every step he took, heaven and earth trembled. He was like a peerless demon king with a shocking aura. Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed coldly. The emperor statue also took a step forward. The broken sword exuded an apocalyptic aura as it slashed over. Clang! The broken sword and halberd met in the void, creating an earth-shattering sound. At the same time, the dazzling flames were like fireworks in the sky. The emperor statue against the blood demon. The broken sword against the halberd. This was a marvelous battle. The two colossal figures continued to clash and collide, causing the sky to darken and the earth to dim. Let's not be idle. Qin Feiyong retracted his gaze and waved his hand. Killing intent immediately erupted. A blood-colored light streaked across the sky like lightning and swept towards Frenzy's Chi. Yes, yes, yes. That's the way it should be. Frenzy laughed. The golden light in his body surged again and blasted towards the blood-colored light. Boom. The blood-colored light was blocked again. And after a moment of stalemate, the light shattered. What the hell is this? Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows. Although the blood-colored light was only formed by a wisp of killing intent and didn't even have a third of the power of the kill character art, it could even seriously injure a half-step divine lord. And according to his estimation, the power of this wisp of killing intent was comparable to a legendary divine technique. But this frenzy actually shattered the killing intent twice. Wait, could it be that he still has a legendary divine technique? Chapter 2000. Just as Qin Feiyong was bewildered, Madman's body was covered in bloodlight and gradually formed a set of blood armor on his body. An even more terrifying murderous aura was emitted from his body. Qin Feiyong was startled and quickly recovered. When he saw Madman at this moment, he was furious. Don't panic, this is not a divine artifact. Although I am belligerent and disgusting, I am still a man of my word. If I say I won't use a divine artifact, then I won't use it. Madman grinned. Not a divine artifact? Qin Feiyong was surprised. Could it be the same as his battle word art, a divine art? Boom. Above. Suddenly there was a deafening noise. Both of their bodies shook and spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time. Then they looked up at the sky at the same time and saw that the blood demon and emperor statue had been torn apart and were dissipating. It's a draw again. Qin Feiyong frowned. Madman retracted his gaze and laughed. Come on, the real battle has only just begun. After that, he took a step towards Qin Feiyong. The blood armor on his body was covered in bloodlight. His hair and eyes were dyed red. He was a living blood demon. Qin Feiyong looked up at the sky with some hesitation. Don't worry. The Sky Dragon Sea is a very special place. Those old things in Nine Heaven Palace can't see the scene here. So just make your move. Madman said. I see. Qin Feiyong nodded and then smiled. As long as the big shots of Nine Heaven Palace couldn't see the scene here, then there was nothing to worry about. Boom. At this moment, a shocking battle intent roared out from his body like a volcano. A set of blood armor also appeared on his body. It was the transformation of the battle word art. Madman was stunned. Don't worry. I, Qin Feiyong, am also a man of my word. If I say I won't use a divine artifact, then I won't use it. Qin Feiyong took a step forward, his black hair fluttering in the wind. With surging battle intent, he threw a punch. Interesting. Madman laughed and punched out without dodging. Bang! The two fists collided like lightning, destroying everything in their path. Puff! The madman spat out a mouthful of blood and smashed into the ground like a cannonball. What? So strong. Madman was rather shocked. Qin Feiyong was not surprised at all. Like a god of war, he stood proudly in the void, his aura shaking the clouds. The battle symbol art was a heaven-defying divine art. Once he put on this armor, it was equivalent to activating the battle formula. As for the mad scientist's blood-red armor, according to his observation, it was only formed from a pinnacle deity art, so its defense was naturally inferior to the battle symbol art. After all, the armor formed by the battle formula could block 90% of the attack power. 90%, what kind of concept was that? In other words, after wearing this armor, Qin Feiyong would only take 10% of the damage. If the madman hadn't suppressed his cultivation, that 10% of the damage would have caused Qin Feiyong serious injuries. But it was a pity. The madman had suppressed his cultivation to the same level as him. Therefore, with the madman's current strength, it was like scratching an itch on his body. It was not worth mentioning at all. So, the madman rushed out from the ground and stood in front of Qin Feiyong. Staring at the armor on Qin Feiyong, his eyes were filled with shock. Take out all your tricks. Otherwise, you will never be able to break through the defense of this armor. Qin Feiyong said. What kind of joke is this? The madman was instantly enraged. Blood-red divine power surged out and crazily pounced at Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong stood in the void, motionless. Boom! The divine power quickly drowned him. But after a while, there was not a single injury on his body. This. The madman was dumbfounded. Blood demon seal. Blood demon roar. Following his low roar, the three divine arts instantly swept through the air, destroying everything in their path. The seal, the sound wave, and the halberd bombarded Qin Feiyong one after another. However, despite suffering such a terrifying bombardment, the armor on his body did not have a single trace of damage. And he himself was not injured at all. Even his breathing was not messed up. How is this possible? Your armor, what level of god art is it? The madman asked with a dazed expression. A mere set of armor was able to block all of his attacks. How was he going to fight? That is not important. Qin Feiyong shook his head. Haha. To be honest, I am a bit regretful now. Why did I suppress my cultivation? But then again, it is more interesting to defeat you like this. The madman laughed. Is that so? The corner of Qin Feiyong's mouth lifted as the blood-red armor dissipated. What do you mean? Are you looking down on me? The madman frowned and said angrily. It is indeed a bit interesting. Qin Feiyong nodded his head. Bastard. Immediately put on that armor for me. The madman roared. If you want me to activate the armor again, let's see if you have the ability. Qin Feiyong said indifferently. Finished. He waved his hands, and the Guiyuan sword art, void returning art, eclipse moon, and other god arts appeared one by one. Fuck. Qin Feiyong, you are too much. The madman rushed towards Qin Feiyong with monstrous anger. Not only did he put away the armor, but he also evolved these low and middle-tier god arts. This was simply a humiliation to him. Qin Feiyong turned a deaf ear. With a wave of his hand, the various deity arts covered the sky as they shot toward the madman. Shatter for me. Madman rushed forward with a ferocious aura. It was a completely overwhelming suppression. But for this, Qin Feiyong did not have the slightest reaction. Divine Dragon Art and Fire Phoenix Art also appeared one after another. What? It's actually the Fire Phoenix Art. The madman was stunned. This time Qin Feiyong could not remain calm. How did the madman know about the Fire Phoenix Art? Fire Phoenix Art. Lu Zhengyang's self-created god art. It is almost on par with the first three moves of the Divine Dragon Art. Are you a descendant of Qin Batian or Lu Zhengyang? The madman shouted. You even know this? Qin Feiyong's heart was in a mess. This madman actually knew so much? Could it be that he also knew the whereabouts of his ancestors? No. This person could not be killed. Even if he had to kill him, he had to think of a way to control him and read his memories. You want to know? Okay, I will tell you. They are all my ancestors. Qin Feiyong said. The madman was stunned. After reacting, he pondered for a moment and asked very seriously, You are a hybrid? You are the hybrid. Your whole family is a hybrid. Qin Feiyong was instantly enraged. All the god arts rushed forward and directly sent the madman flying. The madman vomited blood. The armor on his body was also shattered. Blood flowed out from the broken armor. After all, this time he had the Divine Dragon Art. The power of God Force coupled with the perfect Divine Dragon Art was comparable to a pinnacle god art. Bastard, I am also angry. The madman roared. Humph! Qin Feiyong coldly snorted and rushed forward like lightning. A bloody battle more terrifying than the previous one began. Gradually, the god of life faded away. Both of them were covered in blood, but their aura and fighting spirit were becoming more and more terrifying. However, there was a doubt that had been lingering in their hearts. The doubt in the madman's heart was that Qin Feiyong clearly had stronger means, but why didn't he use them? Why did he keep using these god arts that could not defeat him? Qin Feiyong's suspicions were similar as well. The strength that the madman had displayed so far could only be considered average. With just this bit of strength, it was impossible for the disciples of Nine Heavens Palace to be so afraid of him. And the upper echelons of Nine Heavens Palace would not allow him to run amok in Nine Heavens Palace. Therefore there was no doubt. This madman must still be hiding some trump cards? For example, the golden light that shattered the blood-red color was a terrifying trump card. In other words, right now, the madman was only testing his strength. He had not shown his true ability. Therefore, what made him puzzled was, what was the madman's true method? Although both of them had not shown their true strength, the battle was incomparably intense. After all, when one's cultivation reached this level, no matter how weak they were not comparable to those false gods or combat emperors. Time quietly passed. In the sky above the island, the two figures could no longer be seen. Only the rumbling sounds of collision could be heard, echoing in all directions. An hour had passed since the battle began. The madman was still testing Qin Feiyong's strength. But Qin Feiyong had already thrown away all his doubts and was wholeheartedly immersed in the battle. There was even a smile gradually appearing on his face. It gave others the feeling that he was enjoying it. Actually, he was enjoying it. Because only by enjoying the battle could he seek a breakthrough in the battle. Yes, this was his plan. Raise the level of the various god techniques. For example, Guiyuan sword technique, Void End technique. These god techniques were still useful in Great Qin and Forgotten Continent. But in the ancient world, they were completely useless. Although the six-word divine technique was already enough for him to establish a foothold in the ancient world, he could not rely on the six-word divine technique for everything. Therefore, it was necessary to raise the level of the various god techniques. Especially the divine dragon technique and fire phoenix technique, they had to be raised to the peak level, or even the legendary level. Rumble. The battle had already reached its climax. The various god techniques were all evolved to the extreme by Qin Feiyong. Although the madman did not know what Qin Feiyong wanted to do, his brows gradually furrowed. Because Qin Feiyong's aura was becoming more and more shocking. Moreover, it was gradually emitting a sense of oppression. This sense of oppression went straight into the heart, oppressing the soul. And this sense of oppression seemed to be growing, becoming stronger and stronger as time passed. Especially the smile on Qin Feiyong's face, which was getting brighter and brighter. This made the madman start to feel uneasy. Chirp. Suddenly, accompanied by a high-pitched phoenix cry, the fire phoenix 4 styles instantly appeared out of thin air, and the divine power it emitted gave the madman a fright. It was actually a level stronger than before. Wait, could it be that this guy? The madman's body trembled as he stared at the fire phoenix 4 styles. His eyes quickly surged with anger as he roared. So this is your goal, to use me to comprehend in battle and raise the level of the god techniques. However, Qin Feiyong did not seem to hear it, nor did he look at the madman. He even seemed to have forgotten that he was fighting with the madman. Apart from the fire phoenix technique, he also quickly evolved the divine dragon technique and other god techniques. And all of this seemed to be his instincts, and he did not deliberately evolve these god techniques. Chapter 2001. The various god arts continued to evolve. The form of the fire phoenix art finally appeared in his sea of consciousness. The form of the first move was a fiery red god seal. The form of the second move was a lifelike fire phoenix. The form of the third move, Emperor of all spirits, was a statue of Lu Zhangyang holding a long spear. The form of the fourth move, Rebirth from the Ashes, was a ball of beautiful flames. The form of the four god arts was the same as the dragon god art, with Qin Feiyong's soul as the center, floating in his sea of consciousness. Once the form appeared, it meant that the fire phoenix art had officially stepped into the ranks of the perfect god arts. The returning ruins art and eclipse moon had also evolved into high-grade god arts. The Guiyuan sword art had also evolved into a mid-grade god art. Enjoying the battle and seeking breakthroughs in the battle, as expected of the descendant of Qin Batian. The madman murmured, his eyes flickering. The blood demon 3 styles continued to evolve, and killing intent shrouded the world. 3,000 incarnations. Qin Feiyong whispered. In the void behind him, incarnations continued to appear. 10. 100. 500. In the past, he could only summon 500 incarnations. But now it was still increasing. 600. 700. 800. 900. 1,000. A total of 1,000 incarnations stood in the void behind Qin Feiyong, densely packed in a large area. Each incarnation, whether it was temperament or appearance, was exactly the same as the original body. 1 incarnation was the initial stage. 1,000 incarnations were the initial stage. 2,000 incarnations were the final stage. 3,000 incarnations were the perfection stage. Now that Qin Feiyong could summon 1,000 incarnations, his consciousness had officially stepped into the initial stage. Incarnations. No. They don't seem to be incarnations. The madman looked at the 1,000 incarnations, dumbfounded. Divine Dragon Seal. Divine Dragon Roar. Supreme Emperor. Suddenly, 1,000 incarnations, together with Qin Feiyong himself, shouted in unison. At that moment, purple gold divine light illuminated the world. 1,000 divine seals, 1,000 purple gold divine dragons, and 1,000 emperor statues were in the sky. The terrifying divine might and dragon might shook the sky. It can even evolve the divine dragon art? Furthermore, the aura emitted by each clone is no weaker than that of Qin Feiyong himself. What kind of divine art is this? Madman's body and mind trembled. The earth-shattering deity arts attacked his soul and gaze. Boom! All of a sudden, the divine dragon seal, divine dragon roar, and the aura of a ruler soared to an unprecedented level. This is the aura of a peak-grade deity art. The madman looked at Qin Feiyong, and his heart was in turmoil. He could also evolve the godly arts. Not only that, those on the Nine Heavens Palace's Earth ranking were capable of doing the same as well. But usually, the most it could do was evolve the lower, middle, and upper grades to perfection. In other words, a perfect deity incantation was already the limit. As for raising a perfect deity art to a pinnacle deity art, in the entire Empyrean Palace, only the monstrous geniuses on the heaven ranking could do it. In other words, this person's talent was already sufficient to contend with those monstrous geniuses on the heaven roll. It was also at this moment. Qin Feiyong finally looked at the madman and smiled. Thank you for fighting with me for so long. These deity arts are my thanks to you. As his voice fell, Qin Feiyong and an incarnation waved their hands at the same time, and the sky full of deity arts suddenly turned into a torrent, majestically charging towards the madman. The madman's expression changed. 1,000 incarnations, just a perfect deity art was already enough to make one's soul tremble. Not to mention that this divine dragon art was a peak-grade deity art. He definitely couldn't take it head-on. In the nick of time, Shwa! The madman took a step forward, and his body rapidly expanded several times, instantly disappearing from Qin Feiyong's line of sight. Qin Feiyong was surprised. Although the speed displayed by the madman couldn't be compared to the attainment art, it was still faster than a peak-grade support deity art. In other words, it was very likely that the madman was using a legendary support-type divine art right now. This guy really can't be underestimated. Qin Feiyong muttered. If there was a legendary support deity art, then there might also be a legendary killing deity art. However, even so, as long as the madman kept suppressing his cultivation, then there would be no suspense in this battle. Shwa! Qin Feiyong waved his hand, and the 1,000 incarnations simultaneously stepped on the attainment art, crossing the void. Without waiting for the madman to recover, they once again surrounded the madman. Damn! This speed! The madman's speed surprised Qin Feiyong, and Qin Feiyong's speed surprised the madman even more. Kill! Qin Feiyong shouted. The 1,000 incarnations' killing intent immediately soared into the sky. Divine Dragon Seal, Divine Dragon Roar, shook the sky, destroying all directions. So many peak-grade deity arts. I'm afraid even if I use all my means, I still won't be able to block them. Unless I no longer suppress my cultivation. The madman looked around, his eyes flashing. But if he went back on his words, he would lose face. The most important thing was, once he let go of his cultivation, it was equivalent to admitting defeat. What should he do? Boom! Suddenly, a powerful aura rolled over from the distance. The madman was startled. He looked into the distance and hurriedly said to Qin Feiyong, "Quickly put away the divine dragon art and go hide." Qin Feiyong also sensed the aura. It was extremely terrifying, far surpassing the war god. Qin Feiyong immediately raised his eyebrows. "Didn't you say that without your permission, no one dares to step onto Turtle King Island?" The madman's expression was awkward. "That woman is an exception. You should quickly retreat. Otherwise, if she sees the purple gold dragon blood, you won't be able to survive even if you have 10 lives." Qin Feiyong's eyes were gloomy. The madman said, "Don't worry, I will help you keep your identity a secret." Qin Feiyong looked deeply at the madman before dispersing his incarnation and entering the black tortoise world. The deity arts that filled the sky also dissipated. "I used to be annoyed by that woman. But this time, I really have to thank her. She came at the right time, otherwise it would have been embarrassing. The madman chuckled, and with a wave of his hand, his divine power surged to the ground below. The purple gold dragon blood on the ground was instantly annihilated. The remaining dragon aura in the void was also quickly erased. Soon, a woman in a light purple dress broke through the air. She was tall, her skin was white, her hair fluttered in the wind, and her facial features were exquisite. She could be said to be a peerless beauty. However, her entire body emitted an ice-cold aura. Her face was also extremely cold, as if she was an ice fairy that kept everyone 1,000 miles away. Feng Zihan, what are you doing here? Didn't I say that Turtle King Island is my territory and no one is allowed to enter? The madman looked at the woman with dissatisfaction. However, Feng Zihan directly ignored him and looked around, asking, "Where's Zhang Haotian?" "What Zhang Haotian?" The madman was suspicious. "Don't play dumb. I received news earlier that you brought Zhang Haotian into Turtle King Island. Not long ago, when I came to Turtle King Island, I heard from the disciples gathered outside that you and Zhang Haotian had already started fighting. And at that time, I did feel the fluctuations of a battle." Feng Zihan looked at him coldly. "You really talk too much." A trace of hostility flashed across the madman's face as he laughed dryly. "Zhang Haotian was already defeated by me and ran away with his tail between his legs." "Is that so? Then why didn't I see him on the way here?" Feng Zihan said. "I say, what do you mean? Am I your prisoner?" Such an interrogative tone. "Also, what does my sparring with Zhang Haotian have to do with you? Why are you so nosy?" the madman said impatiently. Feng Zihan's eyes were filled with anger, but he quickly suppressed it and said, "I just came to see what kind of person is qualified for you to invite into Turtle King Island. Whether others are qualified or not is up to me, not you. If there's nothing else, then leave. Don't bother me." The madman waved his hand as if he didn't like this woman. "You!" Feng Zihan clenched her fists as anger rose on her face. After a moment, she took a deep breath and said, "I'll leave, but before I leave, I have a question." "Speak," the madman said. "Previously, I sensed a dragon's aura here, but when I came here, I didn't see any divine dragons. The dragon's aura seems to have been deliberately erased by you. What's going on?" Feng Zihan said coldly. "I already said that this has nothing to do with you, so why are you asking? Do you want to fight with me? Then come, don't dawdle," the madman said angrily as he rolled up his sleeves, looking aggressive. "Bastard!" Feng Zihan was so angry that her body was trembling. She glared at the madman before turning around and leaving angrily. The madman smiled disdainfully and even raised his middle finger at Feng Zihan's back. Black Tortoise World. Qin Feiyang looked at the madman and Feng Zihan, his eyebrows tightly knitted together. What did the madman mean? He actually helped him keep it a secret. Also, the relationship between the two seemed to be somewhat thought-provoking. The anger that Feng Zihan showed towards the madman before was not the anger of an ordinary person towards an ordinary person. Instead, she seemed to be a little wronged. After Feng Zihan left, Qin Feiyang found a pool in the Devil's Land and washed the bloodstains on his body before changing into a clean set of clothes. This set of clothes was taken from Chang Li and had a flame pattern on it. And in the universe bag, other than a pile of clothes, there were 10 soul stones. This was the monthly salary of an outer sect disciple. It's really pitifully little. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Compared to Feng Zihan's 1 million soul stones per month, it was really a drop in the bucket. Shwa! With a flash, he appeared beside the madman. Looking at the incomparably clean Qin Feiyang, the madman teased, "Your movements are quite nimble." Qin Feiyang teased, "Let's not talk nonsense. What is your relationship with Feng Zihan?" "What do you mean by that? What relationship can I have with her?" The madman frowned. Qin Feiyang suspiciously said, "But why do I feel like she was jealous just now?" "Jealous? I think she took the wrong medicine." The madman pursed his lips. Took the wrong medicine? The corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched. It seemed that this person was also a blockhead. Previously, Feng Zihan was clearly displeased because madman brought him to Turtle King Island. If this wasn't jealousy, then what was? Maybe this Feng Zihan still liked the madman. However, The madman was a battle maniac and probably didn't notice this. Chapter 2002. Madman glanced at Qin Feiyong and said, "Let's end today's sparring here, let's go back." "End here?" Qin Feiyong was taken aback. He grabbed Madman and said, "This won't do." "Why not? Today we've met our match. It's a draw." Madman said. "Evenly matched? Doesn't your conscience hurt when you say that?" Qin Feiyong said angrily. 3,000 incarnations, evolved to the small success stage. When Feng Zihan finally came, he clearly noticed that Madman was at a loss. But now, he actually had the audacity to say that they were evenly matched and the victor could not be determined? Wasn't this clearly trying to act shamelessly? Hearing Qin Feiyong's words, Madman's expression was quite awkward. This time, he was really careless. Why did he suppress his cultivation? Otherwise, he wouldn't have been caught by this person. Suddenly, his eyes turned and he secretly laughed. "If you don't want your identity to be exposed, I can fight with you again." Identity exposed? What do you mean? Qin Feiyong was surprised. "I know that woman Feng Zihan very well. She definitely hasn't really left. She should be hiding somewhere and monitoring us," Madman said. Qin Feiyong was shocked and quickly released his divine sense. "It's useless. Feng Zihan's spatial divine item is embedded with the hidden soul stone," Madman said indifferently. Qin Feiyong's eyes flickered. He didn't know if Madman was telling the truth or not. "You don't believe me? Okay, I'll call her out." Madman laughed mockingly. Looking at the surrounding void, he said angrily, "Damn woman, where are you hiding?" Shwa! A woman in a light purple dress suddenly appeared in the void not far away. "She's really here." Qin Feiyong's heart trembled. Madman stared at Feng Zihan and coldly snorted, "I knew you wouldn't leave so easily." Feng Zihan coldly glanced at the madman before looking at Qin Feiyong. That cold gaze caused Qin Feiyong to feel a chill in his heart. Qin Feiyong cupped his hands and smiled. "So it's senior sister Feng Zihan. It's an honor to meet you at last." Feng Zihan said, "I heard you say that Frenzy lost to you?" Qin Feiyong didn't know how to answer. "Bitch, you're humiliating me, do you know that? I am Nine Heavens Palace's fiercest. How could I lose to a rookie who just entered Nine Heavens Palace and is even an outer disciple?" Madman said angrily. "Shut up." Feng Zihan glared at the madman. He looked at Qin Feiyong and said, "Jiang Haotian, I have long heard of your great name. Why don't we spar and see if you have the qualifications to step onto Turtle King Island?" Qin Feiyong was stunned. The first few words were just pleasantries. The last sentence was the main point. Did he have the qualifications to step onto Turtle King Island? If this wasn't jealousy, then what was? It seemed that this woman really liked the madman. It was a pity that the madman, who was a battle maniac, couldn't understand. Feng Zihan's gaze was aggressive. Qin Feiyong shook his head and smiled. As senior brother madman said, "I'm just an outer disciple. How would I dare to spar with senior sister Feng, who is #1 on the heaven leaderboard? Don't be so modest. I'll also suppress my cultivation to the level of war god like madman." After Feng Zihan finished speaking, she really suppressed her cultivation. And without any explanation, divine power surged out as she took a step towards Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong's eyes darkened. Was this woman jealous, or did she want to take the opportunity to help Feng Zihan kill him? Shwa! But suddenly, Madman took a step in front of Qin Feiyong and said angrily, "You stinking bitch, you're not done yet, are you?" "What did you say?" Feng Zihan froze and stared angrily at Madman. "Lousy said you're a stinking bitch." Madman said, "Bastard, I'm not done with you." Feng Zihan was enraged and turned to slap Madman. Madman saw that the situation wasn't good. He grabbed Qin Feiyong and flew away like lightning. "Stop!" Feng Zihan shouted angrily and followed closely. "Really troublesome. Brother Qin, let me tell you, in Nine Heaven Palace, Lousy isn't afraid of anyone, but I'm afraid of this woman." Madman was secretly annoyed. "Why?" Qin Feiyong was puzzled. "This woman likes Lousy, but Lousy doesn't have any feelings for her. Actually, it's all Lousy's fault. I shouldn't have fought with her back then." Madman's face was filled with regret. Fighting with her and her liking you, this doesn't seem to have anything to do with it, right? Qin Feiyong was even more puzzled. Who said it's not related? That's when she started to like me. At that time, we fought on this island for 3 days and 3 nights. We were almost exhausted. Just as the victor was about to be decided, a sea beast suddenly barged in. And it was extremely strong. If it was at its peak, whether it was me or her, we could easily deal with it. But at that time, we didn't have much strength left. Seeing the sea beast charge at her first, I stepped forward to protect her. Don't misunderstand. I really don't have anything to do with her. It was completely out of a man's instinct. Madman thought. I won't misunderstand. But obviously, this woman misunderstood. She thought that you protected her because you liked her. Qin Feiyong snickered. Isn't that the case? Later on, she came to find me every few days. It gave me a headache. Madman rubbed his forehead in annoyance. Qin Feiyong glanced at Feng Zihan behind him and snickered. I thought you didn't know that she likes you. Laozi isn't blind. Madman glared at Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong shook his head in amusement and thought, let's not talk about Feng Zihan for now. In short, thank you for helping me keep it a secret. But you have to do what you promised me. After all, you have to keep your word. Wait. What did I promise you? Madman raised his eyebrows. Qin Feiyong suppressed his anger and said, you said that if you lost, you would help me do something unconditionally. Also, tell me about the situation between my ancestor and Lu Zhangyang. Did I say that? No. I don't remember. Madman shook his head and laughed. Are you really going to go back on your word? Do you believe that I won't spread the news that you lost to me? Veins popped out on Qin Feiyong's forehead. Madman said indifferently, but you have to admit that we didn't win. Moreover, I have something on you, so you can't threaten me. Alright. Let's get rid of Feng Zihan and change places. Then we'll fight again. Qin Feiyong gritted his teeth. Forget it, after being disturbed by that woman, I've already lost interest. Let's wait for the next time. Madman shook his head. Qin Feiyong was incomparably annoyed. His eyes turned and he suddenly sneered. I really didn't expect that you would be such a person. What kind of person am I? If you don't make it clear today, I won't let you off. Madman's tail was suddenly stepped on as he said angrily. Qin Feiyong sneered. Touch your conscience and tell me, if you don't release the suppression on your cultivation, can you beat me? Madman raised his eyebrows. Finally. He glared at Qin Feiyong angrily and said, fine, I admit defeat. I promise you, I will help you do one thing. That's more like it. If you want to spar in the future, feel free to find me. Qin Feiyong secretly laughed. Don't. I can't afford to provoke trouble like you. Madman hurriedly said. I'm trouble like that? What do you mean? Qin Feiyong was suspicious. What I mean is, if I had known that you were the descendant of Qin Batian, I would never have asked you to spar. I'm just looking for trouble. Madman shook his head and sighed, his face full of regret. It was as if in his eyes, Qin Feiyong was a god of plague. What the hell is going on? Qin Feiyong frowned. Madman's words had a hidden meaning. Madman glanced at Feng Zihan behind him and said, let me tell you this, if your identity is exposed, you will be finished on the spot. The entire North region will not tolerate you. Qin Feiyong's heart trembled. Could it be that his worries were true? His ancestor and 9 Heaven Palace had really turned against each other? It's not convenient for me to say the details. You can investigate it yourself. In the future, try not to find me. I don't want to be implicated by you. No. I have to move out of my current cave and take the initiative to keep a distance from you. Madman thought. The corner of Qin Feiyong's mouth twitched. Move out of the cave? Was there a need to be so exaggerated? A moment later, the two left Turtle King Island. Feng Zihan followed closely behind. Outside the island, there were no less than 300 to 400 people gathered. Madman glanced at those people and said angrily, who spread the news of me and Jiang Haotian sparring here? Hearing this, everyone immediately dispersed. But there were 4 people who didn't leave. They were 4 black-clothed men. They stood in the void and ignored Madman, only looking at Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong looked at the four and found that there were no flame patterns on their bodies. They were obviously not from Nine Heaven Palace. Moreover, the aura they exuded surpassed War God. Who is it? Madman looked at the four suspiciously. Feng Zihan flew over and was also puzzled. One of the men with a scar on his face looked at Qin Feiyong and asked, "You are Zhang Haotian?" "Yes." Qin Feiyong nodded. A cold light flashed in the eyes of the four. The scarred man cupped his hands and said, "We are the guards of Star River City, Lord. Please follow us to Star River City, young Master Zhang." His tone and attitude were very polite. But when he heard the word Star River City, Qin Feiyong knew what these four wanted to do. "Not free," Qin Feiyong said indifferently. "Star River City, Lord." At the same time, in the void behind, a light flashed in Feng Zihan's eyes. When the scarred man heard Qin Feiyong's words, he couldn't help but feel angry. He said with a fake smile, "Young Master Zhang, we are just following orders. Please don't make things difficult for us." Qin Feiyong's eyes also gradually became gloomy. Madman suddenly took a step forward and grinned at the four people. Hey, may I ask, what is this Star River City Lord thing? You dare to come to our Nine Heaven Palace and ask for someone?" Qin Feiyong was a little surprised. Didn't he say before that he wanted to keep a distance from him? Why did he take the initiative to help him now? When the four people saw Madman stand out, their pupils shrank. They obviously knew Madman's name. Chapter 2003. Sir, this is a private matter between us and Zhang Haotian. Please don't interfere. Moreover, we are in the Sky Dragon Sea and not Nine Heaven Palace. The scarred man looked at Madman and tried to maintain a pleasant tone. There is nothing wrong with what you said. The Sky Dragon Sea is indeed not under the jurisdiction of Nine Heaven Palace. However, Zhang Haotian is now a disciple of our Nine Heaven Palace. You coming to capture him is equivalent to going against our Nine Heaven Palace. Madman grinned and did not give the other party any face. Sir, this is a bit too much. We have been politely inviting him to Star River City. When did we say we wanted to capture him? The scarred man frowned. I'm too lazy to talk nonsense with you. Zhang Haotian was brought out by me. I naturally have to bring him back alive. If you have nothing to do, then get lost. Don't block my way. Madman shouted. The four's eyes trembled and unwillingly retreated to the side. Let's go. Madman smiled proudly and swaggered past the four of them. Qin Feiyong glanced at the four and chased after Madman. But just as Qin Feiyong passed by the four, the scarred man's eyes flashed and he sent a palm toward Qin Feiyong. The other three were also filled with killing intent. Qin Feiyong had been paying attention to the four. The moment the four attacked, he immediately activated the walk word art and retreated far away. This speed. Seeing this, Feng Zihan's eyes revealed a trace of surprise. At the same time, Madman was also taken aback. He turned around and stared at the four with hostility. Four early-stage divine lords dare to be presumptuous in front of me. Courting death. Boom. Before his voice faded, Madman's aura was fully released and a terrifying blood wave rolled toward the four. No. The scarred man and the other three had a change of expression. But it was too late. The blood wave drowned them. The four screamed as their divine bodies were torn apart in the void. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere. This. Qin Feiyong was dumbfounded by what he saw. Four early-stage divine lords were killed in an instant. This is Madman's true strength? Terrifying. It was too terrifying. If the madman hadn't suppressed his cultivation, he would have had to activate his slaughter domain to have a chance. How is it? Are you scared, silly? Madman looked at Qin Feiyong proudly. Qin Feiyong swallowed his saliva and stepped forward with a frown. Aren't these people a little too arrogant? They clearly know that I am a disciple of Nine Heaven's Palace, yet they still dare to attack me? What's wrong with that? As long as it's not within the Nine Heavens Palace, those old bastards above us won't care. Moreover, you're only an outer court disciple. Who would make such a big fuss for you? Madman looked at Qin Feiyong with a face full of ridicule. Qin Feiyong smiled helplessly and cupped his hands. Thank you. Madman waved his hand. Speaking of which, with your strength, shouldn't you stay in the inner sect? Why do you want to stay in the outer sect? Could it be that it's really as the rumors say, that you were expelled to the outer court because you were too mischievous? Qin Feiyong was suspicious. Expelled to the outer court? What a joke. If I'm not willing, do they have the ability to do so? I can kill my way into the inner sect in minutes. I can only say that it's lonely at the top. Madman shook his head and sighed. Show off. Qin Feiyong's eyes were filled with disdain. He had never seen someone who could show off so much. Madman smiled and glanced at Feng Zihan. Actually, it's related to this woman. Huh. Qin Feiyong was stunned. Didn't I just say that this woman would come to find me every few days? I had a headache, so I hid in the outer court. Madman sighed. Qin Feiyong was stunned. So this is the reason why you're in the outer court? Yes. This woman, although she likes me, she cares about her face. She can't put it down and follow me to the outer court. So I just want to hide in peace. Madman said helplessly. So that's the case. Qin Feiyong suddenly understood. To be able to make Madman afraid to this extent, how difficult was this woman Feng Zihan? Feng Zihan glanced at the 4 dead men before looking up at Madman. He asked, Madman, did you and Jiang Haotian know each other before? No. Madman shook his head. Then why are you helping him? Feng Zihan raised his brows. Can't I have fate with him? Madman snorted and swept up Qin Feiyong and left without looking back. Saying that you have fate with a man, don't you feel disgusted? Feng Zihan said angrily. It's none of your business. I like men. Madman roared. Bastard, bastard. Feng Zihan stamped his foot in anger. Divine items shot out in all directions like a waterfall, causing the sea to churn for hundreds of thousands of kilometers. Countless sea beasts were affected and cried out miserably. What a terrifying woman. Qin Feiyong mumbled. Once she was angry, the sea would shake. If she was provoked, wouldn't she pierce through the sky? However, Madman's words made him more concerned. Like men? He turned his head to look at Madman and goosebumps appeared all over his body. What's with that look? Madman rolled his eyes at Qin Feiyong and transmitted his voice. I have heard about the grudge between you and Feng Zijuan. Feng Yuan and Feng Wenhai aren't simple characters. You have to be careful. Qin Feiyong sighed. They have already begun to deal with me. So fast. Madman was surprised. Qin Feiyong said, do you know why the city lord of Star River City sent people to find me? Is it related to Feng Yuan and Feng Wenhai? Madman asked. The city lord has a son called Nye Yun. This person was bribed by Feng Yuan and wanted to get rid of me during the assessment. But in the end, I killed him instead. There's also the matter of slandering 9 Heavens Palace. I believe you should have received the news. This was also arranged by Feng Yuan. Qin Feiyong thought. I didn't expect him to act so fast. Looks like my decision was correct. I can't afford to offend Feng Zihan's family. Not only will I have to avoid them, I will have to stay away from them. Madman snickered. Avoid? But why do I feel like you don't care at all? Can you not always exaggerate? Qin Feiyong was speechless. Madman chuckled. Under Madman's full speed, the two soon left the Sky Dragon Sea. Wang Qin Feiyong's image crystal also sounded. I'll leave you to it. Madman said as he directly opened an altar and flew up. Qin Feiyong took out the image crystal. After pondering for a moment, he looked up at Madman and said, Can I trust you? You have no choice. Because you can't beat me and you can't kill me. You can only choose to trust me. The madman smiled playfully and his figure quickly dissipated. Sigh. Qin Feiyong sighed. Feng Zihan flew out of the Sky Dragon Sea and looked at Qin Feiyong. Jiang Haotian, what was the result of your fight with Madman? Qin Feiyong smiled. Senior sister, you should ask senior brother Madman personally. Feng Zihan said angrily. If he will tell me, will I put down my face to ask you? Senior sister. It's just a spar. Is there a need to be so concerned? Or does senior sister have other intentions? Qin Feiyong said. Feng Zihan's gaze instantly changed. It was as cold as ice, causing the entire area to turn cold. But Qin Feiyong didn't have any fear and looked straight at Feng Zihan's eyes. And the image crystal in his hand also stopped trembling. After a long time, Feng Zihan opened an altar and stepped on it without looking back, saying coldly, "You're on your own." "I should be the one saying this to your Feng family," Qin Feiyong said with a faint smile. Feng Zihan suddenly turned around and two cold lights burst out of her eyes. Qin Feiyong's expression was calm as he cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Senior sister, take care, I won't send you off." As his voice fell, Feng Zihan disappeared from the altar. Qin Feiyong sighed. Although he had just met Feng Zihan, it was not difficult to see that whether it was her brain or strength, she was much stronger than Feng Zijuan and Gong Zifeng. Even her father, Feng Wenhai, might not be comparable. She was definitely a difficult character to deal with. This Feng family is really a big trouble. Qin Feiyong shook his head and sighed, entering the black tortoise world. Wang. Not long later, the image crystal buzzed and trembled again. Qin Feiyong's divine power surged and awakened the image crystal. Two phantoms suddenly appeared. It was Zhao Tailai and Tang Hai. "Young master, what are you doing? We've been sending you messages, but you didn't respond." Zhao Tailai said unhappily. Qin Feiyong said, "I was in the Sky Dragon Sea before, so I couldn't receive any messages." "What's the matter? Why are you in such a hurry?" Zhao Tailai said in a deep voice, "It's not just a matter, it's a matter of life and death." Qin Feiyong's eyes darkened and he said, "Tell me. Here's what happened. Didn't we go to find Shangguan Qiu as you asked? But she recognized us at a glance. We're your subordinates." Zhao Tailai said, "What? How is that possible?" Qin Feiyong's face was blank. Tang Hai said, "What old Zhao said is true. We didn't even have a chance to speak before we were directly kicked out. Shangguan Qiu also threatened that we're not allowed to enter the treasure pavilion again. How dare she? Even if you're my people, she shouldn't have kicked you out." Qin Feiyong was quite angry. "That's not the point. The point is, how did she know our identity? You know, we've never shown our faces in the ancient world." Tang Hai said, "There's something fishy about this." Qin Feiyong thought for a while, and his eyes trembled slightly and he said, "Could it be them?" "Who?" The two of them were surprised. "Mu Tianyang, Mu Qing. Now, only the two of them know of your existence in Sky Dragon City." "Wait. Shangguan Qiu suddenly blocked me, and he didn't say a word about the Xueqi yellow dragon pill. And he knows you. This matter." Qin Feiyong frowned and suddenly understood, and his eyes shone with a fierce light, and he said, "Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing are behind this." Tang Hai said, "You mean, Shangguan Qiu has already reached an agreement with Mu Tianyang?" "Yes. Disguise yourselves and go to the treasure pavilion. I think the treasure pavilion will auction the Xueqi yellow dragon pill in the next 2 days. Think of a way to get the alchemy fire and cauldron no matter what. Also, I want to know all the details about the city lord of Xinghe City." Qin Feiyong said in a low voice. "Yes." The two of them responded respectfully, and the shadows quickly disappeared. "Mu Tianyang, you're good. Stealing my business. Let's see who will have the last laugh." Qin Feiyong sneered, and left the Black Tortoise world, and opened an altar to return to the Ninth Heaven Palace. Chapter 2004. Nine Heaven Palace. Cave Mansion number 1000. Qin Dage. "Didn't you say that you would be back very late?" Fire Lotus looked at Qin Feiyong, who hurriedly entered the cave mansion and asked in confusion. Qin Feiyong smiled. "Something happened. Then what were you busy with?" Fire Lotus was suspicious. "Nothing." Qin Feiyong shook his head. "Still hiding it from me? I already heard that you and Madman were sparring on an island." Fire Lotus rolled her eyes at him. "Heard?" Qin Feiyong was stunned. Right now, the entire Nine Heavens Palace is abuzz with the news. Everyone is curious as to who won and who lost. Fire Lotus said. Qin Feiyong's mouth twitched. This was too fast. "How was it?" Fire Lotus's eyes were filled with curiosity. Qin Feiyong said, "Madman is very strong. If he hadn't suppressed his cultivation, I definitely wouldn't have been able to beat him." "So, you're saying that you won?" Fire Lotus said. "It's not really my win. Because he has been testing my strength and didn't use his true means. If it wasn't for Feng Zihan coming to disturb the situation, we would probably still be fighting. Qin Feiyong said. Fengzi Han? Fire Lotus was stunned and said in surprise. That big sister of Gongzi's? Yes. This woman's strength can't be underestimated. Qin Feiyong sighed. Then, did she do anything to you? Fire Lotus looked at Qin Feiyong with concern. She didn't. Although the battle with Madman this time didn't end well, I still gained a lot. Qin Feiyong smiled. What gains? Fire Lotus was curious. You'll be scared to death if I tell you. Gue Yuan sword technique, I've already upgraded it to a mid-tier god technique. The Ruins of End incantation, Eclipse Moon, has also been upgraded to a high-tier divine incantation. The 3,000 incarnations have also entered the initial stage. But all of this is nothing. The most important ones are still the Fire Phoenix technique and the Divine Dragon technique. The Fire Phoenix technique has been upgraded to a perfect deity technique. The Divine Dragon art has evolved to a pinnacle deity art. Qin Feiyong said with a smile. Even he couldn't help but feel excited. Hual Yan was also stunned when she heard this. All the major deity arts had been upgraded. Didn't this mean that Qin Feiyong's current strength was several times stronger than before? What a scary guy. Qin Feiyong sighed. However, my identity has also been exposed. What? Exposed? Who knows? Fire Lotus exclaimed. Only lunatics. However, what I don't understand is that he actually helped me keep it a secret. Qin Feiyong frowned. Regarding this matter, he could not understand it no matter how much he thought about it. Keep it a secret, Fire Lotus muttered, her eyes suddenly trembled and said in shock. He couldn't be lying to you, right? Lying to me? Qin Feiyong was startled. He said that he would help you keep it a secret, probably to make you careless, and then secretly inform the upper echelons of the Nine Heavens Palace, and then kill you off. Fire Lotus said in a deep voice. Could it be like this? Qin Feiyong frowned. Although he had just come into contact with a lunatic, it was not difficult to tell from his personality that he was not such a sinister person. However, one had to be wary of others, so it was better to be careful. Otherwise, when the time came, he would really be caught off guard and there would be nothing he could do. Stinking woman, what are you doing? Suddenly, an angry shout came from outside. The voice of a lunatic? Fire Lotus was startled and frowned. Who is he angry at this time? Stinking woman? I think only Fengzi Han can call me that. Qin Feiyong thought. Fengzi Han? What did she come to our sword peak for? Fire Lotus was surprised. Let's go. Let's go out and take a look. Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed, and he turned and walked outside. Fire Lotus also hurriedly followed. When the two of them walked out of the cave, the people from the other caves, such as Gao Xiaowei, Ma Guang, and the others, had already run out. Everyone looked at the first cave abode above. Qin Feiyong and Fire Lotus also looked up, and saw a woman in a light purple dress standing opposite the lunatic in front of the first cave abode. The two of them, one was as cold as ice. The other had a face full of anger. Who is she? Her aura is so strong. Someone muttered. Seeing that Fengzi Han did not speak for a long time, the lunatic became even angrier and shouted, I'm asking you, what are you doing here? Fengzi Han said indifferently, What do I want to do? There's no need to report to you. The lunatic was so angry that his face turned red. Fire Lotus said in a daze, Qin Dage, what's going on? I don't know. Qin Feiyong shook his head. At this moment, Fengzi Han turned and lowered his head to look at Qin Feiyong and the others. So beautiful. When they saw Fengzi Han's appearance, the hearts of the men present could not help but tremble. Fengzi Han said, From today onwards, I will live in this sword peak, and I hope that everyone will take care of me in the future. What? She wants to move here. Qin Feiyong and Fire Lotus looked at each other. The lunatic was also stunned, and when he came back to his senses, he immediately said, I don't agree. This sword peak is not yours. What right do you have to disagree? Fengzi Han said coldly, and directly turned and walked into the second cave abode. Seeing this, Ma Guang hurriedly said, Wait, that. Senior sister, the second cave abode is mine. But before his voice faded, accompanied by a gust of wind, a pile of daily necessities flew out from the second cave abode, and landed in front of Ma Guang in a mess. Just like that I took it all. Ma Guang looked at the things on the ground, and then looked at the second cave abode, his face full of astonishment. Qin Feiyong stepped forward and patted Ma Guang on the shoulder, and said with a smile, "Brother Ma, this is your honor." "Honor?" Ma Guang was taken aback, and turned to look at Qin Feiyong, saying, "Brother Jiang, in any case we are now friends, how can you make fun of me?" Brother Jiang did not make fun of you. At this time, a hearty laugh sounded. Hua Yi shook his head and leisurely walked out of the cave abode. Ma Guang glanced at Hua Yi, and then looked at Qin Feiyong, frowning. "Two brothers, what is the meaning of this?" The other disciples, including Gao Xiaowei, also looked at Qin Feiyong and Hua Yi suspiciously. Hua Yi smiled mysteriously. "Brother Ma, do you know her identity?" "Identity?" Ma Guang was taken aback and shook his head. "Her name is Feng Zihan, the number one on the heaven list." "Do you know what it means to be number one on the heaven list?" "It means that she is the strongest among all the disciples of Nine Heavens Palace. Even some elders are not as good as her." "Now tell me again. Isn't it your honor to be number one on the heaven list living in the cave abode you lived in?" Hua Yi laughed. "Number one on the heaven list. She is Feng Zihan." Ma Guang was dumbfounded. The rest of the people were also shocked to the extreme. "Wait. Brother Hua Yi, Brother Jiang, she is number one on the heaven list. Why did she come to our outer sect?" Ma Guang looked at the two and asked. "I don't know about this. Maybe she is tired of the inner sect life and wants to come to our outer sect to experience life." Hua Yi shook his head. "Experience life?" Ma Guang and the others were speechless to the extreme. These big shots were really bored out of their minds. Madman glanced at the group of people and stared at Qin Feiyong, and said, "Qin Feiyong, no one knows about me and Feng Zihan, don't talk nonsense behind our backs." "Don't worry. I will definitely keep my mouth shut." Qin Feiyong laughed secretly. In fact, he knew that Feng Zihan coming here must have something to do with Madman. Of course it might also have something to do with him. Really troublesome. Madman sighed and turned to enter the cave abode. Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed and he said, "Madman, wait." "What?" Madman didn't look back. Qin Feiyong asked secretly, "Where does the Vice Palace Master live?" "Vice Palace Master?" Madman was slightly taken aback and said secretly, "Why are you asking about this?" "I want to check the history books of Nine Heavens Palace." Qin Feiyong replied. "Check the information of Qin Batian?" Madman was secretly playing tricks. Qin Feiyong said helplessly, "Haven't you heard of the saying, see through but don't say it?" "Don't ask me this kind of thing, I won't tell you. Of course you can ask others, and I won't ask what you want to do. In short, don't look for me if there's nothing." "All of you are troublesome." Madman snorted secretly and entered the cave abode, and the stone door closed. Looking at the closed stone door, Qin Feiyong couldn't help but smile bitterly. The number one on the heaven list came to our sword peak? What the hell is this? All of them are really bored. The group of disciples shook their heads and sighed, and dispersed one after another. Qin Feiyong and the others also returned to the cave abode, leaving only Ma Guang with a bitter face. He looked at cave abode number 2 for a long time, unable to recover his senses. At first, he wanted to fight for cave abode number 1. But who would have thought that the one living in cave abode number 1 was a guy called Madman? Fine. Then he would settle for the second best and live in cave abode number 2. But now, before he could sit down, it was forcibly occupied by the number 1 on the heaven list, Feng Zihan? Why was he the one who was injured? Cave abode number 1000. Hua Yi leisurely followed Qin Feiyong and walked in. Fire Lotus looked at Hua Yi strangely and said, "Brother Hua Yi, we don't seem to have invited you in?" "Sister Fire Lotus, we are all family. Is there a need to be so distant?" Hua Yi looked unhappy. "Don't. We haven't reached the point of being so intimate." Fire Lotus quickly waved her hand and said with a pout, "If you say that, I will be sad. After all, in order to inquire about Shangguan Fenglan's residence, I spent a lot of effort." "Fine, I asked for a rebuff. I'm leaving." Hua Yi shook his head and sighed, turned and walked out of the cave abode in disappointment. Shangguan Fenglan's residence? Qin Feiyong and Madman looked at each other. Fire Lotus hurriedly grabbed Hua Yi and said with a smile, "Brother Hua Yi, I was joking, did you take it seriously?" Haha. I was also joking. Xueqi laughed. He didn't treat himself as an outsider at all. He took out a tea table and 3 stools and placed them in the cave abode. Then, he sat on one of the stools in a dignified manner. Next, he raised his head again and looked at Qin Feiyong and Madman who were standing at the side. He chuckled and said, "Why are you standing there? Please sit." That attitude, that tone, it felt as if he was the owner of this cave abode, and Qin Feiyong and Madman were guests. Qin Feiyong and Fire Lotus looked at each other, shook their heads speechlessly, and sat on the other 2 stools. Chapter 2005. First, you were schemed against by Cheng Li. Then Madman came to spar with you. Now, even Feng Zihan came to find you. Brother Jiang, so many things have happened on the first day of entering Nine Heavens Palace. How are you going to live in the future? Xueqi looked at Qin Feiyong sympathetically. Qin Feiyong said indifferently, "Don't gloat. If they want to deal with me, you won't be able to escape either." Xueqi shook his head with a bitter smile. "I really regret colluding with you." "Colluding with you? Brother Xueqi, do you know how to talk?" Fire Lotus looked at him with dissatisfaction. Okay. I was wrong. Xueqi hurriedly apologized. He looked at Qin Feiyong curiously and asked, "What was the result of your battle with Madman?" "That's not important." Qin Feiyong shook his head and asked suspiciously, "Why did you ask about Shangguan Fenglan's residence?" "Not important?" Xueqi was slightly taken aback and smiled bitterly. "It seems that you still don't know. Right now, all the disciples of Nine Heavens Palace are concerned about this problem. After all, your opponent is Madman." "Let them be." Qin Feiyong smiled indifferently. "Pretend I didn't ask. I went to ask about Shangguan Fenglan's residence. Of course it was for you," Xueqi said. "For me?" Qin Feiyong was taken aback. This was somewhat unexpected. Why did Shangguan Fenglan save you? Obviously, she wanted you to deal with Feng Wenhai. And with your personality, you definitely wouldn't be willing to be a chess piece. So, I thought that you would go and negotiate with her. So, while you were sparring with Madman, I went to ask about her residence. I also learned about Nine Heavens Palace's situation," Xueqi said. When Qin Feiyong heard these words, he looked calm on the surface, but he was extremely shocked in his heart. This person was too terrifying. Not only had he seen through Shangguan Fenglan's scheme, but he had also figured out what she was thinking. Fire Lotus asked, "Shangguan Fenglan, as the Lord of the Disciplinary Hall, should be staying in the Disciplinary Hall, right?" "If that's what you think, Fire Lotus, then you're too naive. According to my investigation, Shangguan Fenglan has been cultivating in seclusion all these years and has not asked about the matters of the Law Enforcement Hall. Feng Wenhai and Yin Hui are basically in charge of all the affairs of the Enforcement Hall. In other words, right now, the ones in charge of the family are actually Feng Wenhai and his wife. The people from the Law Enforcement Hall basically follow the lead of these 2 people. In other words, Shangguan Fenglan's position as Palace Master is only in name. If nothing unexpected happens, Feng Wenhai will definitely become the next Law Enforcement Hall Master. That is the reason why Shangguan Fenglan wanted to take care of Feng Wenhai." Xueqi laughed. Fire Lotus looked at Qin Feiyong and said, "Brother, it's just as you guessed." Qin Feiyong smiled and asked Xueqi, "Then where is she staying now?" "In the depths of Nine Heavens Palace, Lotus Lake. Do you want to go? I can lead the way." Xueqi smiled. "Let's go." Qin Feiyong pondered for a moment, then stood up and said to Xueqi, "I really can't wait." Xueqi shook his head and smiled, then stood up and said, "But you're just an outer disciple. If you go find the Law Enforcement Hall Master, it will probably cause criticism and even cause people to guess. It's best to cover it up." Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed and he brought Xueqi to the Black Tortoise World. Then, he controlled the Black Tortoise World and flew out of the cave dwelling, towards the depths of Nine Heavens Palace. Xueqi looked around in surprise and said, "Brother Jiang, isn't this spatial divine item of yours a little too big?" "Spatial divine item?" Qin Feiyong was stunned and asked with a smile, "Isn't it good to be a little bigger?" "It's good to be a little bigger, but this is too outrageous." It looks like a small world. And there are so many living beings. Xueqi exclaimed. Is that so? Qin Feiyong smiled faintly, but he was secretly paying attention to Huiyi's expression. This person was getting more and more mysterious. He must not be careless. Not long after Qin Feiyong and Huiyi left, a black-clothed youth flew through the air like lightning and landed in front of cave dwelling number 1. He bowed and said, Xueqi requests an audience with senior brother Madman. What's the matter? Madman's voice came from the cave dwelling. Senior brother Feng Zijuan. Let me ask you something. How was your battle with Zhang Haotian? Xueqi asked. Nonsense. He's just a little rookie. How can he be my opponent? If you dare to ask such a boring question again, I'll cripple you. Scram. Madman's angry voice sounded. Xueqi's gaze trembled as he carefully asked, Then what about senior brother and Zhang Haotian? Madman was silent for a moment before he teased. Feng Zijuan wants to know if I have any relationship with Zhang Haotian? I wouldn't dare. Xueqi hurriedly shook his head. I have nothing to do with him. You can do whatever you want, as long as you don't disturb me. Madman said. Yes. Xueqi replied as a sharp light flashed in his eyes. He then turned around and landed below the sword peak. His expression immediately became overbearing as he said, Zhang Haotian, get out here. Inside the cave dwelling, Hualien was taken aback. Then she frowned. Who was shouting and yelling? And from his tone, it seemed like he didn't come with good intentions. Hurry up! Xueqi shouted impatiently. Fire Lotus raised her eyebrows and walked out of the cave dwelling. She looked at Xueqi and cupped her hands. I wonder why senior brother is looking for my brother? The person I want to see is Zhang Haotian, not you. Xueqi said with a face full of arrogance. I'm sorry, my brother happened to have something to do and went out. Please come earlier next time. With that, Fire Lotus turned and entered the cave dwelling. Since the other party was so rude, there was naturally no need for her to be polite. Stop right there. Xueqi raised his eyebrows and said angrily. Hualien didn't even want to pay attention to him and closed the stone door directly. But the moment before the stone door closed, Xueqi stepped out and rushed into the cave dwelling with a murderous aura. He immediately slapped Fire Lotus's face. Fire Lotus flipped in the air and fell to the ground. The mask on her face was also shattered. But because she fell down immediately, Xueqi did not see her face clearly. Who do you think you are? How dare you show your face to me? Do you know who I am? Xueqi's slap was not enough. He stepped forward and stepped on the back of Fire Lotus's head. Fire Lotus was about to get up when her face hit the ground with a bang. Her head was bleeding. Then tell me, who are you? Fire Lotus's face was pressed tightly to the ground. It was difficult for her to even speak. Her heart was filled with grievances. Xueqi said, I'm Xueqi, an inner disciple, half-step divine lord. I'll remember it. Fire Lotus gritted her teeth and said, From your tone, it seems like you're not convinced. As expected, like brother like sister. A bunch of arrogant trash. If it weren't for the rules of Empyrean Palace, I would kill you right now. Xueqi sneered and took out an envelope from his chest. He threw it on the ground and said, Give it to your brother. I'll be waiting for you at the battlefield tomorrow morning. After he finished speaking, he turned around and left with a loud laugh. However, he did not notice that Fire Lotus slowly raised her head. Her blood-stained face was as cold as steel. His eyes were filled with the light of the god of death. After Xueqi left Sword Peak, Feng Zihan walked out of cave dwelling number 2. He looked at Xueqi's back and then lowered his head to look at cave dwelling number 1000. His eyes flashed with an inexplicable light. In the depths of Empyrean Palace. Under Huiyi's guidance, after an hour of hurrying, the Black Tortoise world finally arrived above a lake. The lake was about half a mile wide. The lake water was as clear as a mirror and white mist lingered on its surface. Colorful lotuses were in full bloom. The lake was surrounded by green mountains and clear waters. Hundreds of flowers bloomed. It was a very elegant and quiet place. On the northern shore of the lake, there was an exquisite attic. It was richly ornamented and had an antique feel to it. At this moment, in front of the pavilion, on the balcony by the lake, a woman in purple stood facing the wind, looking at the quiet lake. A cool breeze blew, her black hair fluttered and her dress fluttered. From afar, she looked like a woman from a painting. Extremely stunning. Xueqi looked through the painting, entranced. Qin Feiyong raised his arm and waved it in front of Xueqi's eyes. What are you doing? Xueqi slapped Qin Feiyong's hand away. He glared at Qin Feiyong and continued to stare at the woman in purple. Qin Feiyong's face twitched. He said disdainfully, "You're drooling. It's none of your business." Xueqi wiped the corner of his mouth and laughed. When we were on the sky stairway, why didn't I notice that this woman was so stunning? No matter how stunning she is, it's not for you. Qin Feiyong rolled his eyes. Why? Xueqi frowned. Don't you know who she is? Is she a woman that an outer court disciple like you can get? Qin Feiyong was speechless. You're too vulgar. Love has nothing to do with status or poverty. As long as two people truly love each other, even if there is a difference between heaven and earth, they can still walk together. This is the power of love. Forget it, even if I tell you, you won't understand. Xueqi impatiently waved his hand at Qin Feiyong. He stared at the woman in purple with shining eyes. He's gone mad. Qin Feiyong shook his head. He controlled the black tortoise realm and flew over. Then, he dragged Xueqi and appeared beside the woman. HM? The woman in purple sensed the aura of the two and was slightly stunned. She turned her head and said in surprise, "It's you too." Xueqi cupped his hands and said, "Miss, I am Xueqi. Hua as in flames, E as in easy. I haven't married yet. I have no other relatives in my family, only a pair of deceased parents." The woman in purple looked at Xueqi in astonishment. What kind of drama was this? Qin Feiyong was also stunned. He thought that this guy was just joking, but he didn't expect him to really do it. It had to be said that he was really bold. "Miss, may I ask how old you are? Where do you live? Do you have any relatives? Do you have someone in your heart? What do you think of me?" Seeing that Xueqi was still chattering, Qin Feiyong directly kicked him and said angrily, "Get lost, don't cause trouble. Zhang Haotian, you've gone too far. I'm pursuing happiness." Xueqi said angrily. The woman in purple's mouth twitched. She looked at Xueqi strangely. He actually dared to tease her? This little guy was a little something. P.S. Today's 2 chapters. Chapter 2006. Seeing that the purple-robed woman's eyes were a little unfriendly, Qin Feiyong hurriedly said, "Hall Master, this guy suddenly had epilepsy, don't bother with him." Wait, who is having epilepsy? Xueqi said angrily. Shut up. Qin Feiyong secretly shouted. Couldn't he tell that she was helping him? Who was this Shangguan Fenglan? The hall master of the law enforcement hall. Her strength was unfathomable. The most terrifying thing was that she was scheming, hiding behind the scenes and using their hands to get rid of Feng Wenhai and the others. If she succeeded, the one who benefited the most would naturally be her. And if she failed, she would not lose anything. Even Feng Wenhai would not know that Shangguan Fenglan wanted to deal with him. So, for this kind of woman, it was best to stay away from her. She actually took the initiative to provoke her. Wasn't she asking for trouble? Shangguan Fenglan glanced at Xueqi, looked at Qin Feiyong, and said indifferently, "Do you know where this place is?" "Yes. Lotus Lake. The residence of the hall master," Qin Feiyong said. "Since you know, why did you come? This place is not somewhere you can set foot in. Hurry up and leave." Shangguan Fenglan said. Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows imperceptibly. Did she really intend to be a person who had nothing to do with her? Since that was the case, then he would not be polite. "Hallmaster, then let's be frank. If you want to use us, you have to pay something," Qin Feiyong said. Shangguan Fenglan was stunned and puzzled. "Why don't I understand? Why would I want to use you?" "Hallmaster, this is meaningless." Qin Feiyong laughed. Shangguan Fenglan said, "I really don't understand." Qin Feiyong said, "Then what is the meaning of the note you gave me?" "The one you are talking about. I just want you to find out the truth, so that you won't have to bear the infamy of slandering Zhoutian Palace for the rest of your life. I am doing this for your own good." Shangguan Fenglan smiled. Thank you very much. However, this disciple really doesn't mind bearing this infamy. As for the Feng clan, I'm just a small fry. I don't want to offend them. Brother Hua, let's go and find Feng Yuan and Feng Wenhai to apologize. Qin Feiyang called out to Hua Yi, then turned around and strode away. Shangguan Fenglan looked at Qin Feiyang's back and couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. This little guy was more difficult to deal with than he had imagined. Bring a bramble and ask for punishment? Hua Yi was startled. I believe that Feng Yuan and Feng Wenhai are reasonable people. As long as we show enough sincerity, I think we should be able to bury the hatchet. In fact, these two might even become our backing in the future. Qin Feiyang said. These words were naturally said on purpose for Shangguan Fenglan to hear. In other words, if you continue to put on airs, then I will go and help Feng Yuan. Let's see who will be at a disadvantage when the time comes. That makes sense. Hua Yi nodded thoughtfully. He glanced at Shangguan Fenglan and frowned. What about my happiness? Qin Feiyang's veins were bulging. He wanted to slap him. Shouldn't there be a limit to fooling around? Seeing that Qin Feiyang was about to go berserk, Hua Yi quickly waved his hand and said, Okay, we'll go and apologize. Wait. But at this moment, Shangguan Fenglan spoke. Qin Feiyang raised the corner of his mouth, turned around and said, I wonder if Temple Master has any other orders? Don't pretend. Shangguan Fenglan glared at him. I'm innocent. Qin Feiyang looked innocent. Aren't you the one who has been pretending? Shangguan Fenglan looked at the two and asked, Tell me, what do you want? I want you. Hua Yi chuckled without hesitation. Get lost. Qin Feiyang couldn't bear it anymore and kicked Hua Yi's butt. Hua Yi immediately hugged his butt and jumped up, grimacing in pain. What a joke. Qin Feiyang glared fiercely at Hua Yi, then looked at Shangguan Fenglan and said, First, let me enter the Vice Palace Master's study. Secondly, each of us will pay 100 million soul stones and a legendary level divine art. What? Hua Yi looked at Qin Feiyang dumbfounded. Entering the Vice Palace Master's study. But 100 million soul stones and a legendary level divine art, this was asking for too much. And 100 million soul stones for each person. One for each person. Shangguan Fenglan was also dumbfounded. She really didn't know how this boy dared to ask for so much. Feng Zihan alone can receive 1 million soul stones every month. I think a few 100 million shouldn't be much to you. As for the legendary level divine art, 9 Heavens Palace, as the largest force in the northern region, must have it. Qin Feiyang said lightly. Aren't you afraid of bursting? Shangguan Fenglan said in a deep voice. Bursting? Palace Master, you underestimate the appetite of this disciple and the others. This is not enough to fill the gaps between our teeth. Qin Feiyang laughed. Shangguan Fenglan laughed angrily. Then shouldn't this Palace Master thank you? There's no need to thank me. After all, we're not outsiders. If I can help, I'll help. Qin Feiyang laughed. The corner of Shangguan Fenglan's mouth twitched. The soul stones are no problem, but the legendary level divine art is a little difficult. But in comparison, this Palace Master is more curious. Why do you want to enter the Vice Palace Master's study? In Hua Yi's view, entering the Vice Palace Master's study might be a small matter. But in Shangguan Fenglan's eyes, this was the most important thing to ponder. Qin Feiyang said, purely out of curiosity. Curious? Shangguan Fenglan shook her head disapprovingly and said, How about this? This Palace Master can agree to the above conditions, but the legendary level divine art must be replaced with a pinnacle level divine art. But these things can only be given to you after the matter is over. After that, she added, in addition, everything you do in the future has nothing to do with this Palace Master. After the matter is over? Qin Feiyang frowned. What if our lives are in danger? Hua Yi asked. Shangguan Fenglan said lightly, That's your own business. It has nothing to do with this Palace Master. This? Hua Yi turned his head to look at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and shook his head. It's hard to predict the future. If you give it to us after the matter is over, I think we'd better not blindly get involved. Let's go to Feng Yuan and apologize. Okay. Hua Yi nodded. He finally became serious. Threatening me again? Shangguan Fenglan raised her eyebrows. Qin Feiyang pretended not to see it and looked at Xueqi. When we go to apologize, let's perform well. Maybe we can get more benefits. How should we perform? Xueqi was suspicious. Qin Feiyang said, tell Feng Yuan that someone wants to harm his family. Boom. As soon as these words came out, Shangguan Fenglan's eyes suddenly turned cold, and a terrifying aura firmly locked onto the two. Huayi's pupils shrank, and he quickly became vigilant. Qin Feiyang's expression did not change. He looked at Shangguan Fenglan indifferently and said, this disciple knows that with the strength and status of the palace master, it's easy to kill the two of us. But since we dared to come, that means we're not afraid. You're quite confident. Shangguan Fenglan sneered. Although the strength of this disciple is low, we still have a little confidence. Otherwise, this disciple wouldn't have dared to provoke Feng Yuan high in public at the top of the mountain this morning. Qin Feiyang said. Shangguan Fenglan looked at Qin Feiyang and pondered. A moment later, she withdrew her aura. Xueqi also breathed a sigh of relief. When he touched his back, it was already dripping with sweat. If this woman flipped out, then this matter would not be settled peacefully. Shangguan Fenglan said, you're talking about yourself, Xueqi, Jiang Rushuang, and Jiang Fire Lotus, right? Qin Feiyang nodded. That's a total of 400 million soul stones, 4 peak-grade deity arts. If it were Feng Yuan, he would definitely be able to take it out directly. But this palace master can't get so much in such a short time. Shangguan Fenglan sighed. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, then Feng Yuan wouldn't dare to embezzle the public funds of Nine Heavens Palace. He wouldn't dare. If he's found to be embezzling public funds, even Feng Yuan would be punished. Shangguan Fenglan said. Qin Feiyang said, then you can't go to the resource hall to ask for these soul stones and deity arts? Of course. 400 million soul stones, 4 peak-grade deity arts, is not a small amount. If we go to the resource hall, Feng Yuan will definitely ask where these soul stones and deity arts are. And he will have to ask the first elder. Shangguan Fenglan sighed. Although she was the hall master of the enforcement hall, there were many things that she couldn't decide. Qin Feiyang asked curiously, then how are you going to get these soul stones and deity arts? That's none of your business. But as you said, the future is hard to predict. This palace master can't give you all at once. Shangguan Fenglan said. Then why don't you come up with an idea that can satisfy both of us? Qin Feiyang wasn't surprised. How could such a shrewd woman give him all of it at once? 10 million deity crystals in advance. I'll give you the rest later. Shangguan Fenglan said. That's too little. At least half. Qin Feiyang shook his head decisively. Impossible. Shangguan Fenglan shook her head and said, don't always think of threatening this palace master. If we really fall out, the one who will suffer in the end will definitely not be me. Brother Jiang, what you said makes sense. Even if we tell Feng Yuan, will he dare to come and settle the score with Shangguan Fenglan? Won't we suffer in the end? Taking a step back, even if Feng Yuan doesn't deal with us and lets us follow him and work for him, with our relationship with Feng Zijuan, I don't know what he will do to us. He might even be a cow or a horse. Xueqi said to himself. Of course I know this. I can't really go and join Feng Yuan. But now what we lack the most is soul stones. So this time, we must do our best to get the largest amount. Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. Seeing Qin Feiyang silent, Shangguan Fenglan frowned and said, 20 million no more. No. 100 million no less. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Then if you fail or run away halfway, this 100 million soul stones will be wasted. How about 30 million? That's the limit of this palace. Shangguan Fenglan said. Too little. Qin Feiyang frowned. Almost. Shangguan Fenglan said. Neither of them was willing to give in, and the situation was in a deadlock. Chapter 2007. Looking at Qin Feiyang arguing with Shangguan Fenglan, Xueqi couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. How could this person be so bold? The enforcement hallmaster was a core figure of Nine Heavens Palace. Which disciple of Nine Heavens Palace didn't respect her like a god? But this guy not only repeatedly threatened her, but also refused to back down. If the other disciples were to see this, their jaws would probably drop in shock. Brother Jiang, stop arguing. Xueqi hurriedly interrupted Qin Feiyong. If they continued arguing like this, they would really anger this woman. Brother Jiang, Hallmaster, how about this, we each take a step back. 50 million soul stones first. 50 million soul stones. For you, Hallmaster, you won't suffer a loss or be cheated. And we won't run away from Nine Heavens Palace for a mere 50 million soul stones. As for the rest, we'll pay you in installments. Xueqi said. How do we do it in installments? Shangguan Fenglan frowned. Every time we kill someone, you'll give us some. For example, Feng Wan Hai. If we kill him in the future, you'll pay us 100 million soul stones. Xueqi said. Based on the number of people, this idea is not bad. Shangguan Fenglan nodded. Xueqi looked at Qin Feiyong and asked, Brother Jiang, what do you think? Qin Feiyong pondered for a moment and nodded. I have no objection. Isn't this a happy ending? Xueqi smiled. But words are no proof. Let's write it down. Qin Feiyong said again. Shangguan Fenglan was stunned and immediately said angrily, You're doubting this Hallmaster's character. Hallmaster, please calm down. Although Brother Jiang's method is wrong, it's pardonable. After all, you're not an ordinary person. If you really go back on your word, then we can only watch helplessly. Xueqi smiled flatteringly. Fine. As you wish. Shangguan Fenglan glared at the two of them and said in a deep voice. Xueqi immediately took out a brush, ink, paper, and inkstone. Qin Feiyong scribbled furiously and wrote everything on the paper. Then, he pressed a thumbprint on the paper and looked at Shangguan Fenglan. Palace Master, please. Shangguan Fenglan was about to go crazy. He was actually playing such a childish game with two immature brats? It was simply embarrassing. She cut her thumb, gritted her teeth, and pressed a fingerprint on it. Xueqi smiled. It's finally over. Qin Feiyong was also beaming from ear to ear. He carefully put away the receipt, then extended his hand and said with a smile, Lord Hallmaster, 50 million soul stones. Wait here. Shangguan Fenglan snorted coldly and turned to enter the attic. Xueqi laughed mischievously and said, Brother Jiang, we've made a killing this time. I did get the soul stone, but Feng Yuan and the others aren't that easy to deal with. Qin Feiyong sighed. Xueqi meaningfully said, I think that with Brother Jiang's methods, it shouldn't be too difficult. Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows and said, From what you said, you're planning to sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor. No, no, no. Since I've taken the soul stone, then I must contribute. However, I also know that I'm not that capable, so Brother Jiang is still the one who comes up with the plan. I can only assist from the side. Xueqi laughed. Qin Feiyong rolled his eyes at him. Soon, Shangguan Fenglan came out and threw a Qianquan bag to Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong glanced at it and kept it. Shangguan Fenglan said, Aren't you going to be more careful? Qin Feiyong smiled and said, I still believe in the Palace Master's character. Don't say such high-sounding words. I've already given you 50 million soul stones. I hope to see results as soon as possible. Shangguan Fenglan said with a cold face. Don't worry. Very soon, the Palace Master will know that the 400 million soul stones and the god art will not be spent in vain. Qin Feiyong smiled and looked at Xueqi. Brother Hua, let's go. You go first, I'll be right there. Xueqi responded, looked at Shangguan Fenglan, and smiled like a gentleman. Miss, are you free tonight? Shall we go and have a seat? Scram. Shangguan Fenglan's face darkened as she shouted angrily. I'm sincerely inviting you, and I don't have any ulterior motives. I just want to communicate more. Xueqi licked his face and said shamelessly. But before he could finish, Qin Feiyong angrily dragged him into the Black Tortoise realm and rushed out of the sect like lightning. That's enough. Shangguan Fenglan was about to explode with anger. One openly threatened her, the other unscrupulously teased her, and they were both outer sect disciples. She was a big shot of the Nine Heavens Palace. When had she ever encountered such an encounter? It's best if it can be of some use. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless. 50 million soul stones. I don't even dare to dream about it. Black Tortoise Realm. Qin Feiyong sized up the universe bag, his face full of excitement. To break through to the initial stage of the false god realm, one needed 1,000 soul stones. From initial to small success, one needed 10,000. From small success to large success, 100,000. From large success to perfection, 1 million. From perfection to perfection, one needed 10 million soul stones. In other words, these 50 million soul stones were enough to accumulate 5 perfection war gods in a short period of time. This was a true overnight millionaire. Nie Yun and the others' soul stones were nothing. No. Hua Yi still had a portion. Other than Hua Yi's portion, there seemed to be only 30 million left. Wait. This guy, why isn't there any reaction at all? Qin Feiyong turned to look at Hua Yi, only to see him standing at the side with his head lowered. No one knew what he was thinking, but he was giggling non-stop. Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed, he patted Hua Yi and said, "What are you thinking about? What are you doing? You scared me." Hua Yi glared at Qin Feiyong angrily. "You were too engrossed in your thoughts. Tell me, are you thinking about Shangguan Fenglan?" Qin Feiyong asked curiously. "Isn't that nonsense? Could it be that I'm thinking about you?" Hua Yi rolled his eyes at him. Qin Feiyong shook his head and said, "Why are you so stubborn? This woman, you really can't afford to offend her." "I'm only interested in women that I can't afford to offend." Hua Yi chuckled. "You really won't turn back until you hit the wall. How about this, I'll help you?" Qin Feiyong said. "Really?" Hua Yi's eyes lit up. "Of course, us brothers, would we lie to you? But if I help you, you have to repay me. You don't need these soul stones and divine arts." Qin Feiyong laughed. Hua Yi was stunned. He immediately rolled his eyes and said, "I knew you didn't feel at ease. Let me tell you, don't play dumb with me. This time, not a single soul stone less. Let me calculate. 50 million soul stones. 4 people equally. 1 for 1. 1 for 2. I've calculated, each of us will get 12. 5 million soul stones. This is just enough for me to break through from the advanced god of war to the peak. Give it to me." Hua Yi stretched out his hand, looked at Qin Feiyong, and chuckled. Did he really think he was a fool? Such a large amount of soul stones, he didn't even dare to think about it before. Now that it was in front of him, how could he not want it? "Let me tell you, you're so stingy. You'll never get Shangguan Fenglan." Qin Feiyong snorted coldly. "This is 2 different things. It's irrelevant. Don't talk nonsense. If you want to take it all for yourself, I'm not done with you." Hua Yi said. All right, who wants to take it all for himself? Don't think that I'm as shameless as you, okay?" Qin Feiyong pursed his lips and carefully counted out 12. 5 million soul stones, not one more, not one less, and threw it to Hua Yi. In other words, right now, he only had 37. 5 million left. However, he should be satisfied. This amount of soul stones, if placed on an outer court disciple, he would not be able to earn so much in his lifetime. Half an hour later, Qin Feiyong and Hua Yi finally returned to the outer court cave. But as soon as they entered the cave, Qin Feiyong and Hua Yi were stunned. Fire Lotus was sitting on a stool in a daze. Her face was stained with blood and her body was also somewhat dirty. She didn't even notice Qin Feiyong and Hua Yi entering the cave. "What's going on?" Qin Feiyong glanced at the cave. When he saw the broken mask on the ground, his entire body was filled with killing intent. He walked in front of Fire Lotus and asked in a deep voice, "Who did this?" "Brother." As soon as Fire Lotus heard Qin Feiyong's voice, she immediately shed tears of grievance. "Who is it? Tell me. I'll go kill him right now." Qin Feiyong shouted, his heart aching. However, he didn't notice that Hua Yi, who was behind him, had been staring at Fire Lotus's face the entire time, his eyes flashing with a bright light. "It's a person called Xueqi. He's an inner disciple, a half-step divine lord. At that time, after you and big brother Hua Yi left, he came looking for me. Originally, I was very polite, but he had an overbearing attitude, so I didn't want to bother with him. But because of this, it seemed to have angered him. He directly barged into the cave, slapped me, and even stepped on my head. As Fire Lotus spoke, she threw herself into Qin Feiyong's embrace and said, "Brother, believe me, it's really not my fault. He was the one who was rude first. I didn't cause any trouble for you." "Xueqi." Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed with an astonishingly sharp light, and laughed. "Silly girl, of course I believe you. Don't cry, I'm here." "There's a letter on the table?" Xueqi suddenly noticed that there was an envelope on the coffee table. "That was left behind by Xueqi," Fire Lotus said. Xueqi opened the envelope and took out the letter inside. On it, there were 7 words written with a murderous aura. "Tomorrow morning, see you on the battlefield." Battlefield, Xueqi frowned and handed the letter to Qin Feiyong, saying, "This is a letter of challenge. This Xueqi invites you to enter the battlefield to fight." Qin Feiyong glanced at the letter and asked, "Where is the battlefield?" "Between the inner and outer sect, to enter the battlefield, one needs to pass through a fixed transmission altar. It is said that this battlefield is formed by a spatial divine object. It is hidden in the void and is very large inside. It doesn't matter how you attack." Xueqi said. "Spatial divine object." Fire Lotus was shocked and said, "Qin Dage, let's forget about this matter." "Why?" Qin Feiyong frowned. "Since it is formed by a spatial divine object, then the big shots of Nine Heaven Palace will definitely be able to observe the situation inside. What if your purple gold dragon blood is exposed when you fight with Xueqi?" Fire Lotus said worriedly. "What about you? What should I do about this?" Qin Feiyong asked, his heart moved. What a considerate woman. "I'm fine. As long as Qin Dage is fine." Fire Lotus thought. What a silly girl. Qin Feiyong shook his head and said, "Don't worry. A mere half-step Divine Lord doesn't have the ability to expose my identity." Literature Museum. Chapter 2008. He even dares to bully my little sister. He's simply courting death. There must be a conclusion to this matter. I will immediately investigate Xueqi's background. Xueqi said in a deep voice. Qin Feiyong was slightly stunned. He looked at Xueqi and said, "When did Fire Lotus become your little sister? Do we still need to distinguish between each other? She's your little sister. Isn't that the same as my little sister? Besides, Fire Lotus calls me Big Brother Xueqi. As a man, how can I let her be wronged?" Xueqi said angrily. Fire Lotus was moved and said, "Thank you, Big Brother Xueqi. We're all family, don't be so polite." Xueqi smiled and looked at Qin Feiyong. "I will go investigate now, wait for my news." Qin Feiyong nodded. Xueqi turned around and walked a few steps, but suddenly turned to Fire Lotus and said with a grin, "Sister, you should continue to wear a mask in the future." "Why?" Fire Lotus was stunned and looked at Xueqi suspiciously. "Because you're too beautiful. If those disciples outside saw you, wouldn't they come looking for you every day? I believe you wouldn't like having a bunch of flies following you around all day." Xueqi chuckled. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Fire Lotus said angrily, her cheeks flushed red. After Xueqi left the cave, Qin Feiyong wiped the blood on Fire Lotus's face and said with a smile, "Go wash up in the Black Tortoise world and relax." Fire Lotus nodded. Qin Feiyong waved his hand, and the red lotus instantly disappeared. "Xueqi, I want to see who gave you the courage to hit my people," Qin Feiyong muttered. A cold light flashed in his eyes and he followed Xueqi into the castle. "Fire Lotus, are you all right?" Mermaid Princess voice suddenly sounded. Qin Feiyong was stunned and turned to Mermaid Princess. He saw the Mermaid Princess sitting cross-legged on the ground and looking at Qin Feiyong with concern. "She's fine." Qin Feiyong waved his hand and took out the Xueqi bag. He smiled and said, "These soul stones should be enough for you to cultivate for a while." Everyone opened their eyes and looked at the Xueqi bag with joy. Tan Tai Li's gaze turned to Qin Feiyong and said, "Feiyong, you to cultivate. Look at your cultivation. You've been in the ancient world for so long but you've made no progress, at most, half a month." Qin Feiyong said, "Okay. I'll start cultivating now." Qin Feiyong nodded and said with a smile. He didn't know how long it would take to refine a soulstone now. He remembered that it used to take half an hour to refine one. After taking out a soul stone and putting the Chengkuan bag on the altar, Qin Feiyong sat cross-legged on the ground and started to refine it silently. Inside the castle, time flew by. About half an hour later, the soul stone in his hand was finally refined. The time has been shortened by half? Qin Feiyong was stunned. In other words, now he could refine 4 soul stones in 2 hours. 48 soul stones in 24 hours a day. It took 100,000 divine gems to break through to the advanced divine gems. 100,000 divided by 48 was more than 2,080 days. About 5.5 years. What? 5.5 years? Qin Feiyong was dumbfounded. He didn't know this, but he was shocked when he calculated. It took more than 5 years to refine 100,000 soul stones? He was really lucky to have the castle. Otherwise, it would take him a whole 5 to 6 years just to refine these soul stones. The castle's time rule was that 1 day outside was 1 year inside. In other words, now, he only needed 5 to 6 days to refine 100,000 soul stones and step into the advanced divine gems. Compared to others, this really saved a lot of time. Late at night, above the 9th heaven palace, a waning moon emitted a weak light. A black shadow quietly came to the sword peak and gently knocked on the tightly shut stone door. The next moment, the stone door opened. Qin Feiyong stood inside the door and looked at the black shadow with a smile. "Come in." After the black shadow entered, Qin Feiyong closed the stone door, turned around and waved his hand. A flame appeared, illuminating the entire cave. And the person standing in front of him was Gao Xiaolong. Of course. Before Gao Xiaolong came, he had sent a message to Qin Feiyong in advance, so Qin Feiyong was able to open the door in time without any accident. Gao Xiaolong took out 2 jade boxes from his chest and handed them to Qin Feiyong, smiling. "This is what senior brother Feng asked me to give you." 2 jade boxes. One was the size of a palm, square in shape. The other one was a rectangular jade box that was a foot long. Qin Feiyong first grabbed the square jade box and opened the lid. A black fruit appeared in front of him. This fruit was only the size of a baby's fist, exuding a trace of black fog, filled with an evil aura. That's right. This was the death god fruit. After closing the lid of the box, Qin Feiyong took the long jade box and opened it to take a look. Surprisingly, there was a tree branch that was half a foot long lying inside. This branch was perfectly round, similar to a straight chopstick. It was pitch black with Yin energy swirling around it. In a trance, one could even hear ghostly laughter coming from the Yin energy. Yin soul wood. Qin Feiyong's eyes lit up. This young Master Feng was indeed amazing. He got his hands on the death god fruit and Yin soul wood so quickly. Gao Xiaolong said, "Young Master Feng also said that although he can't help you with things like soul stones, he can provide you with some herbs. If you need anything in the future, don't hesitate to look for him." Qin Feiyong closed the jade box and smiled. "Thank him for me." "Also, I heard during the day that Xueqi issued a challenge to you?" Gao Xiaolong asked. Qin Feiyong nodded. "This Xueqi." Gao Xiaolong was about to say something. Bang! The cave stone door was kicked open and Xueqi stormed in angrily. "What are you doing?" Qin Feiyong looked suspiciously at Xueqi. "Isn't it because..." Before Xueqi could finish his words, he saw Gao Xiaolong and asked suspiciously, "He is?" Qin Feiyong said, "He's called Gao Xiaolong, one of us." Xueqi nodded and said angrily, "You don't know this Xueqi is actually Feng Zijuan's man." Qin Feiyong was stunned. He turned to look at Gao Xiaolong and asked, "Is that so?" This Xueqi can be considered Feng Zijuan's confidant. He usually follows behind Feng Zijuan like a dog. This time, he issued a challenge to you. 100% it was ordered by Feng Zijuan. Gao Xiaolong said. Not only that, after Xueqi issued the challenge, he spread the news everywhere, cutting off your escape route. Because now, everyone knows about it. If you don't show up tomorrow, there will be people talking behind your back. Xueqi said. That's right. Moreover, he spread the news everywhere to embarrass you in front of everyone tomorrow. Gao Xiaolong added. So, it was ordered by Feng Zijuan. What did I say? After knowing that I entered the Nine Heavens Palace, he will definitely make a move. Qin Feiyong laughed. Brother Jiang, why do you look like you're looking forward to it? Xueqi was surprised. This was my plan all along. However, their arrogance exceeded my expectations. They actually dared to harm the Fire Lotus. This debt, I will make them pay double tomorrow. Qin Feiyong sneered. Plan? Xueqi muttered. This guy was becoming more and more unfathomable, secretly laying out such a trap. This time, Feng Zijuan was probably going to suffer a big setback. Qin Feiyong looked at Gao Xiaolong and said, "You go back, tell young noble Feng to prepare to watch the show." Okay. Gao Xiaolong nodded, turned around, and teleported, disappearing in a flash. Qin Feiyong's gaze turned to Xueqi, asking, "Why did you take so long to gather information? You're not familiar with this place. Do you think it's easy to gather information?" Xueqi rolled his eyes at him. Qin Feiyong said meaningfully, "With your brain, it shouldn't be difficult." Xueqi smiled embarrassedly, saying, "I went to inquire about Shangguan Fenglan's situation." I knew it. Qin Feiyong rolled his eyes. Xueqi glanced outside the cultivation dwelling and said mysteriously, "You don't say, there's something you'll never guess." "What is it?" Qin Feiyong looked at him curiously. Xueqi said, "This Shangguan Fenglan is the sister of the Treasure Pavilion's Shangguan Qiu." What? Qin Feiyong was dumbfounded. This was something he really didn't expect. I was still thinking that Shangguan Fenglan could get her hands on 400 million soul stones, so she has such a sister. But this Shangguan Qiu is really not simple. Master is the Treasure Pavilion's chief pavilion master. Her sister is the hall master of the law enforcement hall. No wonder she didn't even take Feng Zijuan seriously back then. Xueqi sighed. The two sisters. Then I think Shangguan Qiu is more suitable for you than Shangguan Fenglan. Qin Feiyong teased. What are you talking about? Am I the kind of person who plays around? Xueqi angrily glared at Qin Feiyong, but then he rolled his eyes and changed the topic. He laughed mischievously and said, "However, if I can get both of these sisters, then I'll be able to hold my head high for the rest of my life. In the future, I'll be able to walk with my back straight." Ah! Qin Feiyong was stunned and kicked him without hesitation, saying angrily, "Get out of my sight as far as you can, and don't appear in front of me again." You're jealous. Xueqi hurriedly dodged, and then raised his middle finger. He scorned Qin Feiyong and then disappeared like a wisp of smoke. You want to get the sisters, and you say you're not a playboy? I've really never seen such a shameless person. Qin Feiyong shook his head. However, now the relationship seemed to have become a little complicated. Shangguan Qiu cooperated with Mu Tianyang. He cooperated with Shangguan Fenglan, and he and Mu Tianyang were life and death enemies. She was almost unable to make sense of it. Headache. Rubbing his forehead, Qin Feiyong closed the stone door of the cave residence, entered the ancient castle, and continued to refine the soul stones. Chapter 2009. Between the inner and outer gates, there was a wide river that meandered from north to south. There was a huge square above the river. In the middle of the square, there were 10 altars. On each altar, there was a number. Battlefield number 1. Battlefield number 2. And finally, battlefield number 10. That's right. This was the entrance to the battlefield. Early in the morning, people came to the square one after another. There are a lot of people here today. A mere outer disciple is so popular? Brother, that's not right. Everyone is here to watch the show. Don't you think this Zhang Haotian is too daring? He even dares to offend Feng Zijuan? He's courting his own death. Before Zhang Haotian entered Empyrean Palace, as long as he hid, Feng Zijuan couldn't do anything to him. Now that he has entered Empyrean Palace, how can Feng Zijuan deal with him? Isn't it as easy as killing a chicken? That's right. It's said that a newborn calf isn't afraid of a tiger. Now it seems that it's not without reason. He even dares to accept Xueqi's challenge. Xueqi is a half-step divine lord. I heard that he has a perfect divine technique and a perfect support divine technique. He even has a supreme grade divine artifact. How can an outer sect disciple defeat him? Everyone was discussing. When the sun rose, there were already tens of thousands of people gathered in the square. Most of them were outer disciples. The square could hold 50 to 60,000 people. It was very big. Move, move. Suddenly, a slightly arrogant laugh sounded. Fatso, who was wearing a golden coat, had all kinds of golden rings on his hands and a thick golden chain around his neck. Behind him were two followers. He looked like a local tycoon as he swaggered into the square. Brother Fatty, you're here. Brother Fatty, the same old rules. Seeing Fatso arrive, everyone was a little afraid and a little expectant. Of course. Fatso walked to a corner of the square and waved his sleeves. A big golden table appeared on the ground. Let's cut the crap. Xueqi 1 to 1. Zhang Haotian 1 to 10. Those who are not betting, please move aside and make way. As soon as Fatso finished speaking, the people in the square immediately swarmed forward. I bet on Xueqi. I also bet on Xueqi. It's obvious. We have to bet on Xueqi. Everyone took out their soul stones. Some bet a dozen, some bet a few hundred, and some bet a few thousand. A short while later, the table was filled with soul stones. The two lackeys were busy collecting soul stones and taking notes at the same time. Seeing the crowd swarming over, Fatso beamed with joy. I bet 50,000 soul stones. I bet 100,000. To be able to take out so many soul stones, one had to be an inner disciple. Furthermore, he had to be one of the top inner disciples. It's so lively? At this moment, 2 men and 1 woman stepped into the square. When they saw the scene in front of them, they were stunned. They were Mu Tianyang, Mu Qing, and Xueqi. What? 1 to 10? When they heard everyone's discussion, Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing looked at each other. Such a high payout? Mu Qing laughed secretly. Ancestor, isn't this obviously giving us soul stones? Keep it low, keep it low. Mu Tianyang chuckled, walked to the table, took out a Xueqi bag, and slapped it on the table. Fatso was stunned. He looked at the Xueqi bag and thought to himself, so arrogant, could it be that he was a rich man? Mu Tianyang glanced at the people around and suddenly grinned, saying, I bet on Zhang Haotian, 5 million soul stones. As soon as these words came out, the entire place fell into dead silence. Everyone looked at Mu Tianyang in shock. Fatso and the 2 lackeys were also stunned. They had completely forgotten what they were doing. Voila! There was no suspense. The next moment, the square was in an uproar. What? It's actually Zhang Haotian? It's still 5 million soul stones. Oh my god, he's crazy. Who is he? Isn't he afraid that these 5 million soul stones will be wasted? Fatso came back to his senses and grabbed the Xueqi bag. After carefully looking at it for a while, his face suddenly twitched. There really were 5 million soul stones. So many soul stones. Who wouldn't be tempted? Fatso swallowed his saliva, looked up at Mu Tianyang, and asked, Are you sure you want to bet on Zhang Haotian? I'm sure. Mu Tianyang nodded. Generous. Courageous. You're the first person who dares to bet on Zhang Haotian. Fatso laughed and even gave Mu Tianyang a thumbs up, saying, Tell me your name. Mu Tianyang. Mu Tianyang said. Fatso looked at the 2 lackeys beside him and said happily, Quickly write it down. Okay. The 2 lackeys, one carefully counted the soul stones, and the other recorded Mu Tianyang's name. Mu Tianyang? This name is so unfamiliar. Wait, I heard that among the new disciples this time, there seems to be someone called Mu Tianyang. A new disciple actually has 5 million soul stones. Could he be a disciple of a big family? But to take out 5 million soul stones at once, even those famous rich families don't seem to have the ability to do so. The surrounding disciples felt that it was very unbelievable. Hearing this, Mu Qing sneered. What was 5 million? In a while, this 5 million would become 50 million. Just thinking about it made him excited. What is it? Someone dares to bet on Zhang Haotian. 5 million soul stones? A surprised voice suddenly rang out. It's Xueqi. Everyone turned their heads and saw a young man in black standing at the entrance of the square with a stunned face. If it wasn't Xueqi, who else could it be? The people automatically moved aside to make a path. Xueqi walked step by step to the gambling table and glanced at the crowd. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Who bet on Jiang Haotian?" "Me." Mu Tianyong smiled faintly. "You? You dare to bet on Jiang Haotian? Aren't you afraid of losing everything?" Xueqi sized up Mu Tianyong and sneered. "It's our freedom to bet on whoever we want. As for whether or not I'll lose everything, we'll know when the results are out." Mu Tianyong smiled. "Haha. I've never seen such a stupid person." Xueqi laughed, took out a Xueqi bag, threw it on the table and said to Fatso, "I'll bet 500,000 soul stones on myself." Okay. Fatso nodded. "Kid, you'll regret this. Just you wait." Xueqi smiled coldly at Mu Tianyong, then walked to the altar of the first battlefield. He crossed his arms, glanced at the crowd and asked, "Jiang Haotian hasn't arrived yet?" "I didn't see him." Everyone shook their heads. "Don't tell me he's too scared to come?" Xueqi laughed. Many people also burst into laughter. Jiang Haotian's strength is indeed not good, but he's not that timid. However, at this moment, a faint laughter sounded. Everyone looked up and saw 3 figures flying through the air. The one in the lead was Qin Feiyang. Hua Yi and Fire Lotus followed behind him. Hua Yan also listened to Hua Yi's words, and put on another mask. Looking at the arrogant Xueqi, a cold glint flickered in the eyes of the 3. "They're here. They're finally here." Everyone quickly retreated to the side. Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus landed in front of Xueqi. "They really dare to come?" Xueqi was stunned. Qin Feiyang smiled. "For the sake of face I have to come, right?" Xueqi was slightly taken aback. He chuckled and said, "Face is worthless." "Yes, face is worthless at all. What's valuable is life." Qin Feiyang nodded. "Ha! So you also understand." Xueqi laughed. "Of course I understand." Qin Feiyang smiled. "The smell of gunpowder is coming." Mu Tianyong smiled secretly. "I'm a little puzzled. Isn't Qin Feiyang always afraid of trouble? Why did he accept Xueqi's challenge this time?" Mu Qing was suspicious. "I think this Xueqi must have done something to make him angry." Mu Tianyong guessed. Xueqi looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Let's not talk nonsense and enter the battlefield." Okay. Qin Feiyang smiled. "Brother Jiang, wait." Hua Yi suddenly said. "What's wrong?" Qin Feiyang looked at him in confusion. Hua Yi pointed to the gambling table and said, "Before entering the battlefield, you have to bet first." "Bet." Qin Feiyang was stunned. "There's no time to explain. Come with me." Hua Yi dragged Qin Feiyang to the gambling table and looked at Fatso with a smile. "What's the odds for Jiang Haotian?" Fatso glanced at the 2 and said, 1 to 10. "So high." Hua Yi was stunned. His eyes suddenly shone with green light. Without hesitation, he took out a Xueqi bag and threw it on the table, saying, "I bet 12. 5 million soul stones on Jiang Haotian." "What? 12? 5 million? Oh my god. So much." Previously, that Mu Tianyong bet 5 million soul stones on Jiang Haotian. That was already shocking enough. Now, there's another 12. 5 million. How many nouveaux riches are among the new disciples this time? The square was once again in an uproar. Fatso was also petrified on the spot. 5 million. Qin Feiyang heard everyone's discussion and turned to look at Mu Tianyong. "I didn't take a single soul stone from you. Why are you looking at me like that?" Mu Tianyong said indifferently. "You didn't take my soul stones, but how many villages and noble families did you have to kill to get 5 million soul stones? This doesn't include the soul stones that you and Mu Qing have already refined." "You're really ruthless," Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice. "Don't worry too much. In this world, the weak are prey to the strong. Besides, not all the villages and noble clans were massacred by me. Most of them, I only looted their treasure vaults." Mu Tianyong said indifferently. Qin Feiyang shook his head and sighed. Uncle Yuan shouldn't have saved this person in the first place. This was simply a scourge. While the 2 were talking, Fatso had already checked Hua Yi's Xueqi bag. He looked at Hua Yi in a daze and asked, "Brother, are you serious?" "Of course." Hua Yi nodded. "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and register." Fatso's face was red as he roared at the two followers. Literature Museum. Chapter 2010. Xueqi turned to look at Qin Feiyong and urged, Brother Jiang, you should place your bet too. Me? I won't bet. Qin Feiyong shook his head. Why? Xueqi looked at him suspiciously. The others were also puzzled. Qin Feiyong said, I don't have confidence in myself. If I lose, won't I lose everything? Xueqi was stunned. Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing were also dumbfounded. What was this guy doing now? The others, on the other hand, burst into laughter, their faces full of ridicule. Xuetai's smile became even more brilliant. He looked at Qin Feiyong and said, At least you have some self-awareness. However, it's best for you to bet. Because later, you might not be able to walk out of the battlefield alive. You're that confident? Qin Feiyong frowned. Yes, I'm that confident. If you're afraid, it's still too late to back out now. Xuetai sneered. Even if I'm afraid, I can't be a coward. You're very arrogant, aren't you? Well, if you have the ability, let's have a private bet. Qin Feiyong said angrily. What do you want to bet? Xuetai was stunned and smiled. 100 million soul stones. Qin Feiyong gritted his teeth and said. What? A private bet of 100 million. The faces of those who were laughing at Qin Feiyong suddenly turned pale. Wasn't the stakes too high? Xuetai's face also became extremely ugly in an instant. Don't you understand? Then I'll say it again. If I lose, I'll give you 100 million. If you lose, you'll give me 100 million. Do you have the guts? Qin Feiyong shouted. Do you have so many soul stones? Xuetai sneered. Qin Feiyong stammered and looked a little guilty. If I don't, I wouldn't dare to bet with you like this. Anyone can say that. But who knows if you have it or not? Come out and show us. Xuetai said indifferently. In his opinion, Qin Feiyong was just putting on an act. In other words, they didn't dare to enter the battlefield with him. They wanted to scare him and take the opportunity to escape. Qin Feiyong said angrily, There are so many people watching. Are you afraid that I'll go back on my word? Nonsense. If you want to go back on your word, what can you do? Xuetai shouted. So long-winded. I'll vouch for him. An impatient voice was heard all of a sudden. This voice? Everyone was shocked and hurriedly turned their heads to look. They saw a black-clothed youth standing outside the square with his hands behind his back. His aura was terrifying beyond compare. Lunatic. Everyone's eyes trembled. Even such a terrifying existence had come. The madman looked at Xuetai from afar and said, A mere 100 million soul stones is nothing. Xuetai, I'll vouch for Zhang Haotian. Is that enough? Enough, enough, enough. Xuetai nodded repeatedly. Qin Feiyong looked at the madman meaningfully, then looked back at Xuetai and said, What about you? Can you take out 100 million soul stones? Xuetai's face was green and red. If you can't take it out, just admit it. No one will laugh at you. Of course, you can also find a guarantor. But I believe that such a large amount of soul stones, no one will vouch for you. Qin Feiyong sneered. That's right. Qin Feiyong wasn't targeting Xuetai, but Feng Zijuan. If he wanted to play, he would play big. This time, he must make Feng Zijuan pay the price. Vouch. Xuetai's face was gloomy as he said in a deep voice, Just you wait. After saying that, he soared into the air and flew toward the inner sect like lightning. What is he going to do? Everyone looked at him suspiciously. Qin Feiyong looked at Xuetai's back as his eyes flickered. Without thinking, he knew that Xuetai was definitely going to find Feng Zijuan. This was exactly what he wanted. Huiyi's eyes flickered as he transmitted his voice. Brother Jiang, you're cheating Feng Zijuan. I'm cheating him. Qin Feiyong sneered. What's that saying again? You can't bear the evil you bring upon yourself. After suffering such a big loss in the treasure pavilion, why can't this Feng Zijuan learn from his mistakes and behave himself? Huiyi sighed and said, However, you must also bet on Fatso Jin. Why? Qin Feiyong was stunned. This Jin Fatso Jin is Feng Yuan's grandson. Xueqi glanced at Fatso, who was standing beside the gambling table, and transmitted his voice. What? Feng Yuan's grandson? Qin Feiyong was surprised. Yes. In fact, the real banker is Feng Yuan. This kind of gambling has existed in Nine Heaven Palace for many years. And without exception, Feng Yuan is the one behind all of them. Xueqi secretly said. So brazen? The Great Elder doesn't care. Qin Feiyong frowned. Care? That's exactly what the Great Elder wants. Because the soul stones won from this kind of gambling will not go into Feng Yuan's pocket, but into the resource hall's treasury. In other words, this is using the gambling to earn soul stones from us disciples. Xueqi pursed his lips. So that's how it is. What you mean is that the resource hall is the one who makes a profit, and the resource hall is also the one who makes a loss. Qin Feiyong said. That's right. The resource hall is actually the Great Elder's house. Xueqi said. I really didn't expect Nine Heaven Palace to operate like this. Qin Feiyong secretly smiled and said, Don't worry, I'll place my bet. Then why did you say those words without confidence just now? Xueqi was stunned and suspiciously asked. I deliberately said that to Xueqi. Think about it, if I directly bet tens of millions of soul stones, Xueqi will definitely think that I'm so confident. Do you have any tricks up your sleeve? Wouldn't it be boring if he chickened out at the last minute? Qin Feiyong smiled and secretly told the mermaid princess and Qin Rushuang to count the exact number of soul stones. And last night, they had already refined a lot. You! Xueqi shook his head and laughed. How sinister, setting a trap for Xueqi as soon as he arrived. What? 100 million soul stones. Where do you expect me to find so many in such a short time? Inner sect. In a cave, Feng Zijuan looked at Xueqi's shadow with a face full of anger. I know this is making things difficult for senior brother, but Zhang Haotian has already said that if I don't agree, wouldn't I be falling into his trap? Xueqi said. Falling into his trap? What do you mean? Feng Zijuan frowned. This Zhang Haotian obviously doesn't dare to fight with me, but he's afraid of embarrassing himself in front of everyone, so he wants to use this bet of 100 million to scare me. I think this person has no ability other than a little bit of cleverness. Xueqi said with a face full of disdain. Are you sure? Feng Zijuan pondered for a while and asked. I'm sure. Xueqi nodded. But 100 million soul stones isn't a small number. Even my grandfather won't give it to me. Feng Zijuan sighed. Then you can go look for your sister. She can receive 1 million soul stones a month. Would she lack this little bit? Xueqi said. This? Feng Zijuan was a little hesitant. Xueqi said, Senior brother, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Feng Zijuan gritted his teeth and said, Wait a moment, I'll ask my sister. Okay. Xueqi nodded. Feng Zijuan turned off the image crystal and sent a message to Feng Zihan. Sister. When Feng Zihan's shadow appeared, Feng Zijuan immediately called out affectionately. Feng Zihan looked at him indifferently and asked, You arranged for Xueqi, right? Feng Zijuan nodded. Feng Zihan said angrily, Didn't I say before? Don't get involved in Zhang Haotian's matter in the future. Why won't you listen? I know, but this debt, if I don't settle it personally, I'll feel terrible. And this is a good opportunity. Sister, I've never asked you for anything before, but this time I'm begging you, lend me 100 million soul stones, or help me be a guarantor. Feng Zijuan begged. 100 million? Feng Zihan raised her eyebrows. Feng Zijuan briefly explained the situation. Frenzy is also here. Feng Zihan's brows furrowed even tighter. Feng Zijuan said, Sister, I promise, this time I'll get rid of Zhang Haotian. Get rid of him? How did the two people Gu Yong sent last time die? You don't know? Feng Zihan said. Those two people are only perfect war gods, and this Xueqi is a half-step divine lord. They aren't on the same level. Feng Zijuan said. Feng Zihan pondered. Feng Zijuan begged. Sister, I beg you, help me. Zijuan, this is no small matter. If you succeed, grandfather and the others will naturally be very happy. But if you fail, do you know how they will punish you? Feng Zihan sighed and said. Don't worry, I won't fail. Feng Zijuan solemnly vowed. Feng Zihan took a deep breath and said, "All right, I'll vouch for you. I hope you won't disappoint me." "Forget it. I'll go and see for myself." There was some helplessness in her words. "Thank you, sister." Feng Zijuan was overjoyed and immediately sent a message to Xueqi. After receiving the news, Xueqi was also overjoyed and flew towards the square. "He's back." Seeing Xueqi return, Huiyi's mouth curled into a smile. Xueqi landed opposite Qin Feiyong and sneered, "I don't have a soul stone, but someone vouched for me." "What? Someone vouched for you?" Qin Feiyong looked flustered. "What? Are you afraid now?" "But it's too late. The person who vouched for me is the #1 on the heaven list, Senior Sister Feng Zihan." Xueqi laughed. "It's actually Senior Sister Feng Zihan." The surrounding disciples were shocked. Qin Feiyong stared at Xueqi and said in a deep voice, "Words have no proof." Whoosh! But before he finished speaking, a woman in a light purple dress landed on the square like lightning. "It's really Senior Sister Feng Zihan." Everyone raised their heads and looked at Feng Zihan with eyes full of worship. Xueqi said, "Senior Sister, this Zhang Haotian still doesn't believe it. You vouch for me." Feng Zihan didn't speak. She scanned the crowd and finally found Madman outside the square. Swish! She took a step forward and landed beside Madman, frowning. "What do you mean? You're actually vouching for Zhang Haotian?" In fact, she was testing Madman's words. If Madman showed a confident appearance, then this Zhang Haotian might be hiding some unknown method. On the other hand, if Madman was just watching a show, then there was no need to worry. As long as I can enjoy a good show, it doesn't matter even if I have to pay 100 million soul stones. Madman waved his hand generously and said without a care. Chapter 2011. Hearing this, Feng Zihan looked at Qin Feiyong again. Qin Feiyong straightened his back and looked straight at Feng Zihan, but there was a hint of panic in his eyes. And this panic was clearly caught by Feng Zihan. Is he really pretending to be calm? Gradually, Qin Feiyong's eyes began to evade, as if the guilt in his heart was about to be uncontrollable. He asked, "Senior Sister, are you really going to vouch for him?" Feng Zihan's eyes flashed, and she nodded without hesitation. She was almost certain that Qin Feiyong was pretending to be calm. "Haha. Zhang Haotian, now that both of us have vouched for each other, let's quickly enter the battlefield." "Right. By the way, let me remind you, once you enter the battlefield, life and death are up to fate. Be prepared." Xueqi kept sneering, his eyes full of contempt. Life and death are up to fate? The panic on Qin Feiyong's face was obvious in an instant. "Frenzy, your 100 million soul stones are destined to be wasted. I just don't understand, how can such a person enter Turtle King Island?" Feng Zihan looked at Frenzy angrily and said, "Sigh." Frenzy shook his head and sighed. "What are you sighing for?" Feng Zihan frowned. You are usually such a shrewd woman, but now you are being played in circles without realizing it. Tell me, what are you thinking?" Frenzy shook his head. "Played?" Feng Zihan was taken aback, and immediately looked at Qin Feiyong. The altar of battlefield #1 had already been awakened. Xueqi was already standing on it, looking at Qin Feiyong provocatively. Qin Feiyong smiled faintly, took out a Chenkuan bag, threw it to Fire Lotus, and secretly said a few words before stepping onto the altar. After stepping onto the altar, Qin Feiyong looked at Feng Zihan from afar, and a bright smile crept onto his face. "Oh no!" Seeing that smile, Feng Zihan had an ominous premonition in her heart. Because it was a sinister smile that indicated that his scheme had succeeded. "I bet 37 million soul stones on Zhang Haotian." Suddenly, Fire Lotus's voice rang out again. The entire place fell into a dead silence again. Feng Zihan also looked towards Fire Lotus, only to see Fire Lotus throwing the Chenkuan pouch that Qin Feiyong had given her onto the gambling table. 37 million soul stones? Something's wrong. "Xueqi, come down quickly." Feng Zihan's eyelids twitched as he shouted at Xueqi. But it was too late. The two of them had already sent the altar into the battlefield. Fatty Goldie came back to his senses and looked at the Fire Lotus in shock. He quickly grabbed the Qianquan bag and checked it. Stop looking. Not one more, not one less. It's exactly 37 million. Fire Lotus said calmly. Terrifying. Where did this fellow get so many soul stones? Mu Qing stared at the Qianquan bag, dumbfounded. Who knows? Mu Tianyang whispered. His heart was also shocked to the extreme. For the past half a year, he had been robbing and robbing, but he didn't get so many soul stones. Looking at the altar that was gradually dimming, Feng Zihan suddenly turned around and stared at Madman, angrily saying, What do you mean? Are you ganging up to trick me? Trick you? You're thinking too much. You're the one who's stupid, coming here blindly. Madman despised. You? Feng Zihan was so angry that his chest heaved up and down. He coldly snorted. Then let me see what ability this Zhang Haotian has to be able to defeat a half-step divine lord. Finished speaking. With a wave of her hand, a wisp of divine power flew out and poured into the blood-colored altar. Following that, a bloody light rushed out from the altar and an image suddenly appeared in the sky above the square. And in the image, there was a dark and boundless world. The earth was fragmented, dark clouds surged in the sky, and there were wisps of tragic auras left in the void. This was the first battlefield. And in the void, two figures stood facing each other. It was Qin Feiyang and Xueqi. This is your first time entering this battlefield. Xueqi smiled. Qin Feiyang nodded. However, Xueqi had already inquired about the situation of the battlefield and told him on the way here. He knew that now the people outside were watching, so he had to end the battle quickly. After all, this Xueqi was a half-step divine lord. The slightest carelessness could cause him to be injured. Injuries were small, but bleeding was a big deal. Xueqi smiled and said, Since it's your first time entering the battlefield, then I will kindly tell you the rules of this battlefield. Rules? What rules? Isn't it just to use all means? Don't talk nonsense, let's begin. Qin Feiyang said lightly. You actually know? Xueqi was surprised. However, Qin Feiyang's attitude made him feel very displeased. Rumble. A monstrous divine might emerged, blotting out the sky as it pressed down on Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang did not move. His face was also without any ripples. Don't pretend anymore. The oppressive power of a half-step divine lord can even imprison a perfect realm war god, let alone a mere initial realm war god. Now I guess you can't even move. Xueqi walked step by step towards Qin Feiyang. His face was full of smiles as he said, Do you know how stupid you are? Qin Feiyang still did not speak. But there was a hint of ridicule in his eyes. He actually thought that he could imprison him with just this pressure? It's too ridiculous. A mere initial realm war god dares to accept the challenge of a half-step divine lord? Tell me, are you stupid or not? But this is also good. Do you know why? Because you've helped me. Xueqi smiled. Indeed, I've helped you. After killing me, you can ask Feng Zijuan for credit. At that time, a lot of wealth and a good future will be waiting for you. Qin Feiyang said. He can still talk. Xueqi's expression froze. The people outside also had a look of disbelief. Logically speaking, shouldn't he be unable to even move his mouth after being imprisoned by the pressure of a half-step divine lord? Wealth and a good future, everyone wants it, but it also depends on whether they have the life to enjoy it. Is the pressure of a half-step divine lord very powerful? The corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth lifted. He slowly raised his arm and a murderous aura suddenly surged out. A blood-red long sword quickly condensed in his hand. Boom! As soon as the blood-red long sword appeared, a shocking murderous aura instantly swept across hundreds of thousands of miles of the void like a tide. Even the people outside felt a great sense of threat. This guy really has a trump card hidden. Lunatic muttered. The outcome has been decided. Mu Tianyang smiled faintly. Indeed. Mu Qing nodded. On the battlefield. Xueqi stared at the blood-red long sword with disbelief in his eyes. Why is this murderous aura so terrifying? He felt as if he was facing a god of death. His body and mind could not help but tremble. The arrogance from before was also nowhere to be found. Actually, I don't care what you want to do to me, but you hurt Fire Lotus. This is absolutely unforgivable. Forgive me for the mistake you have made. Qin Feiyong's eyes surged with murderous intent. He used the travel character art and teleported behind Xueqi. So fast. Xueqi's eyes trembled. He hurriedly turned around, divine power surging out as he lunged at Qin Feiyong. Bullying my family, even if you are the heavenly emperor, I will not allow it. Qin Feiyong shouted explosively as he raised his hand and waved it in midair. An expanse of golden light surged out explosively, and it was like a golden tide that roared through the sky as it fiercely collided with the divine energy. Boom! After a short stalemate, the divine power immediately rebounded and drowned Xueqi. Ah! Screams of pain and agony immediately rang out. What's going on? He actually rebounded Xueqi's divine power? The people outside were in disbelief as they watched this scene. What kind of technique was this? It was so heaven-defying. Even Feng Zihan's pupils suddenly shrank. At the same time, Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing looked at each other and glanced at Fire Lotus at the same time. So it was because Xueqi had bullied this woman. He was courting death. What did Qin Feiyong care about the most? That was the people around him. Bullying the people around him was tantamount to touching his reverse scale. But then again, who was this woman? Why did Qin Feiyong care so much about her? I don't think I've seen her before. On the battlefield. How can I be so useless? I'm even afraid of a low-tier god of war? No. I'm a half-step monarch god. One is the sky, one is the earth. How can I lose to him? Shatter! Xueqi, who was submerged in divine power, had an extremely malevolent expression. Following a roar, a huge black tiger broke through the divine power and pounced towards Qin Feiyong with its claws and fangs bared. The terrifying divine power shattered everything in all directions. Divine technique! Qin Feiyong squinted his eyes. It was a perfect divine technique. I can't fight it head-on. Swish! The Xing character formula and teleport. In an instant, he disappeared from Xueqi's sight. The giant black tiger missed and shattered tens of thousands of miles of space. Xueqi's eyes were filled with surprise. But in the next moment, a terrifying light appeared behind him. Qin Feiyong raised his blood-colored long sword and furiously chopped down. Waves of blood-red sword energy pounced towards Xueqi like a toppling mountain and overturning sea. I'm a half-step monarch god. I won't lose. Xueqi's hair fluttered in anger. With a clang, a black battle-axe appeared. Divine power surged. The battle-axe instantly recovered. Then, he grabbed the battle-axe and slashed at the sword energy. Rumble! The sword energy was shattered. A mouthful of blood surged up Qin Feiyong's throat, but he forcefully swallowed it down. His eyes were filled with astonishment. This was actually a supreme-grade divine artifact. A half-step monarch god's cultivation base coupled with a supreme-grade divine artifact was still somewhat difficult to deal with. Haha. Regardless of how strong your means are, it still can't make up for the gap between our cultivation bases. Go to hell for me. Xueqi is floating again. Holding his battle-axe, he charges towards Qin Feiyong. You're really arrogant. Qin Feiyong shook his head. Instead of retreating, he moved forward to meet him. Just before the two met, Qin Feiyong flashed again and disappeared without a trace. Don't hide if you have the guts. Xueqi roared. You're thinking too much. I don't want to fight you head-on. I just don't want to destroy that battle-axe. Qin Feiyong's voice sounded in Xueqi's ears. However, when these words fell into Xueqi's ears, he couldn't help but laugh in anger. He actually had ideas about his battle-axe? Clang! With a backhand, he slashed out with the battle-axe. The void was shattered, and the wind was deafening. The power emitted was extremely terrifying. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.